Chapter 1721. Qin Diheng's words sounded like he was complaining about Xiao Hua, but his tone was filled with excitement. Qin Diheng himself knew how difficult it was to attract 20 green pythons without a sound. Moreover, these green pythons were only around the 11th layer of qi refining. Although there were many of them, it wasn't difficult for them. After all, the 4 disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect could fly, and these green pythons could only float in the air at most. They couldn't pose any threat to them, and the biggest possibility was that the 4 of them couldn't kill all of these green pythons and let some of these green pythons escape, attracting more green pythons. Then, the benefits they could obtain would be much less. You can use your methods. This little brother guarantees that none of these green pythons will escape. Xiao Hua laughed loudly, his figure flashing, passing by the group of green pythons and appearing behind the green pythons. These green pythons clearly had some intelligence. When they saw the 3 cultivators appear in front of them, they immediately split into 4 groups, hissing, spitting their tongues, and rushing towards the 4 of them. Kuan Fian's artifact was a string of jade beads. It was called the Thunder Trapping Bead. She flew in the air and tossed out the Thunder Trapping Bead. Instantly, it expanded and a brilliant ball of light enveloped the 4 green pythons that were swimming over. The green pythons' eyes reflected the brilliance of the Thunder Trapping Bead, but they didn't seem to be moved and didn't have any fear at all. These 4 green pythons simultaneously raised their heads from the ground, straightening half of their bodies. They were about 40 to 50 feet tall, not much lower than Kuan Fian's flying height. Hiss! The pythons opened their mouths at the same time, and countless stinking poisonous fog sprayed out, enveloping the shining Thunder Trapping Bead. Quick! Kuan Fian saw this, and instead of being shocked, she was happy. Forming a spell, she pointed her finger, and the Thunder Trapping Bead produced a strong suction force, and in the blink of an eye, the thick poisonous fog was sucked in completely. Kuan Fian knew that this poisonous fog was the poison of the green pythons. It was extremely poisonous, and was one of the benefits they wanted on this trip. After the 4 green pythons finished spitting out the poisonous mist, they were not as listless as other ordinary poisonous snakes. Instead, they were even more excited. Their entire bodies twisted, and their snake tails, which were nearly 4 zhang long, whipped towards the Thunder Trapping Bead with lightning speed. Pa! Pa! The incomparably hard python skin struck the Thunder Trapping Beads, causing the light on the Thunder Trapping Beads to flicker a little. Then, the beads actually sank down a foot or so from midair. This green python was indeed powerful. Not only are they strong, but their skin is also tough. If my Thunder Trapping Bead wasn't supported by a formation, it would have been broken by them. Kuan Fian was shocked at the strength of the azure pythons, but he was also glad. These pythons were only 10 feet long, and were obviously not the strongest among the azure pythons. And since the azure pythons' tails were able to move the Thunder Confining Pearl, then their python skin would naturally be good stuff. Kuan Fian took a deep breath, and once again activated his Fali, raising up the Thunder Trapping Beads that had been struck down. Once again, they let out light, and the 4 azure pythons once again spat out the poisonous mist. Sun Shu's magic tool was similar to Kuan Fian's. It was called the Thunder Lock, and its shape was a small lock. Under the activation of his Fali, it was about a foot long. It also had a suction force, and could also use the power of lightning. After absorbing the poisonous mist spat out by the azure pythons, Sun Shu rubbed his hands together, pouring his Fali into it. From the Thunder Lock, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed out, striking the python that was floating in midair. The strong power of lightning struck the 10-foot-long azure python down from midair, and a burst of green smoke came out from the python. That azure python writhed on the ground for a moment, but did not move. When the other azure pythons saw this, they immediately had the intention to retreat. As their tails twitched, they quickly swam towards the direction of the dense fog. Sun Shu frowned, and with a clap of his hand, several ice seal talismans appeared, and with a wave of his hand, he sent them towards the azure pythons. Who knew that the azure pythons could actually sense the movement of the yellow talismans? Before the ice seal talismans hit them, they each swung their tails. Pop-pop-pop sounds rang out, and the yellow talismans were actually smashed into pieces, turning into talisman papers that fell to the ground. This is troublesome. When Sun Shu saw this, he threw out another handful of confinement talismans. This time, some of the azure pythons used their tails, some turned their heads, and spat out a mouthful of poisonous mist. When the poisonous mist landed on the light of the confinement talismans, it was like pouring cold water on a flame, corroding the light and turning it into broken talisman papers that fell to the ground. Truly powerful. Sun Shu was a bit flabbergasted. Even the ice seal talismans and confinement talismans were not afraid. This really was the strength of the 11th layer of Qi refining. At this moment, her lightning lock had already flown over. Sun Shu's hand seal had already been completed, and he pointed his finger again. Ka-ka, 2 crisp sounds rang out, and 2 bolts of lightning appeared from the lightning lock, striking 2 of the azure pythons and killing them. The remaining 2 pythons quickly rushed towards Xiao Hua, who was wrapping up the tail. When Xiao Hua flew to the tail of the azure pythons, there were already 6 azure pythons chasing after him. Among them were the 2 azure pythons that were angered by Xiao Hua just now. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua did not have Kuan Fian's lightning trap pearl. When he saw the azure python spitting out poisonous mist, he knew that it was poison. However, there was no way to collect it, so he could only flash away, dodging the poisonous mist. Fortunately, the azure pythons had a limited amount of poison. After spitting a few times, they used their tails to attack. Xiao Hua did not take out any magic tools, and only used his martial arts that seemed to be a light body technique. Twisting and turning in the shadows of the snake tails, he seemed to be the most relaxed. Seeing Xiao Hua so frivolous, the 6 azure pythons became even more anxious, and their tails twitched even more vigorously. From time to time, they even used their stinking snake mouths to move closer, wanting to swallow Xiao Hua in one bite. Junior brother Xiao, be careful. In the distance, Sun Shu saw that one azure python on his side was fleeing, and Qiandiheng's side was even worse. Unexpectedly, 2 pythons had also fled, and he couldn't help but hurriedly shout, "Damn it, if I don't show my power, you guys think I'm a sick cat." Xiao Hua cursed, and with a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal flew out from his body. While countless amounts of heaven and earth spiritual qi poured into the cloud-suppressing seal, a yellow light scattered from the cloud-suppressing seal, covering the 9 azure pythons. Suddenly, the pressure of the magic treasure heavily hit the azure pythons. The azure pythons were suppressed to the point that they couldn't move, and the negative karma that came from the cloud-suppressing seal was like the nemesis of the heavens, causing the azure pythons to feel an irresistible fear. It was as if they were hibernating, dead still and motionless. Junior brother Xiao, how come you didn't kill a single azure python? Sun Shu asked curiously. I don't know where to start. Xiao Hua giggled. This python skin is obviously a good thing. Wouldn't it be a pity if it was damaged? The azure python's 7 inches is the weakest, and killing the azure pythons is also done from there. Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. Good. Xiao Hua nodded, and with a wave of his hand, the great wisdom sword appeared in his hand. Using the heavenly staff technique, a row of afterimages of the great wisdom sword streaked across, and in the blink of an eye, each of the 9 azure pythons had a fist-sized hole in their 7 inches. Seeing the snake blood gushing out, Sun Shu hurriedly waved his hand, and the thunder lock flew into the air and absorbed the snake blood. Xiao Hua rubbed his head and put away the cloud-suppressing seal, and said with a smile, Junior brother doesn't have a magic treasure to collect the snake blood, and the poison from before is also a waste. This azure python's poison is very powerful, and ordinary magic arts can't be used, and if you're not careful, you might even injure yourself, so you can only rely on magic treasures to collect it. Sun Shu nodded, thought for a moment, and clapped his hand, taking out a small jade bottle, and handed it over with a smile. I said, this is a magic treasure that I used in my early years, called Yuning. It can collect and store water-like things, but because I received the thunder lock from Master, I haven't used it for many years. If Junior brother Xiao needs it, please accept it. Thank you. Senior sister Sun. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He took the Yuning and the refined jade slip and put it into his space. At the same time, he clapped his hand, took out the hemp dust, and handed it over with a smile. Senior Sister Sun, it's impolite to exchange gifts. This is Junior Brother's magic treasure, called hemp dust, an earth-type magic treasure. Junior Brother is very comfortable with the cloud-suppressing seal, so I'll exchange this thing with Senior Sister. That's not appropriate. A trace of disappointment flashed through Sun Shu's eyes, and she hurriedly waved his hand. Although the cloud-suppressing seal is powerful, it's still a magic treasure. You're an aura-refining cultivator. How can the magic power in your body support the cloud-suppressing seal for a long time? I've also seen you use this hemp dust, and it's very powerful. If you give it to me, what will you use? Let's wait until you've advanced to the foundation establishment stage in the future, and after you've obtained a better magic treasure, then we'll talk about it again. Xiao Hua saw Sun Shu's resolute refusal and could only smile. Since it's like this, Junior Brother will accept Senior Sister's kindness. In the future, when Junior Brother has any good magic treasure in his hands, Junior Brother will ask Senior Sister to speak, and Junior Brother will definitely give it to you. How can magic treasures be good? No matter what, it has to be a magic treasure. Sun Shu blinked and said. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, Senior Sister is right. If it's not a magic treasure, Junior Brother will be too embarrassed to speak in the future. Wow, these are all Junior Brother Zhao's methods? A cry of surprise came from afar, and that cry of surprise was very exaggerated. This person was naturally Qian Diheng, who had just finished dealing with the two green pythons. Of course, I didn't think that the incomparably strong, coarse skin and thick flesh of the green pythons would be so weak in Junior Brother Zhao's hands. Following that was Kuan Fian's voice, and her voice really did contain traces of jealousy. She had tasted the green python's methods of breaking through with brute force, and the thunder-confining bead had been whipped by the green pythons several times, and had lost quite a bit of her fa. Although she didn't see Xiao Hua kill the green pythons, but looking at the 9 green pythons on the ground, she naturally knew that Xiao Hua had easily killed them. Excuse me. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and said, let's first take care of these green pythons, then talk about it. All right. Qian Diheng liked to harvest the most and said with a smile, our methods of taking care of the green pythons are still not enough. Why don't we just directly divide these up? And if we can return to the Imperial Thunder Sect or some other gathering, we can let others take care of them. -8. Chapter 1722. Qian Diheng's words were extremely true. Professional matters should be done by professional cultivators. Although Xiao Hua knew how to refine pills, he didn't necessarily have to refine all the pills himself. Many pills could be traded with spirit stones. Moreover, Sun Shu and the other two roughly knew what materials could be used on the Azure Python's body. If it was damaged, wouldn't their efforts be wasted? According to the previous agreement, Xiao Hua took an extra 20%. Everyone divided the green python's corpse, then looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose, sighed, and once again flew towards the area where the thick fog was. Like this, Xiao Hua attracted another 40 to 50 azure pythons. However, the more he went, the more powerful the azure pythons were. Moreover, their numbers also seemed to have increased. Aside from Xiao Hua using the cloud-suppressing seal to deter the group of pythons, Qian Diheng and the other two were somewhat powerless. On the 4th time, Xiao Hua finally hit a snag. He actually attracted the attention of 3 Foundation Establishment green pythons. These 3 green pythons were different from the other green pythons. Their bodies were shockingly large, several hundred feet long. Moreover, on their enormous bodies, there were 4 palm-sized wings. These 3 green pythons flew in the air. Not only were they supported by a faint black mist, but when they flashed their wings, they weren't any worse than Xiao Hua's usual flying technique. Seeing the 3 huge azure pythons, Xiao Hua's first reaction wasn't fear. Instead, he thought of the little white dragon he met a long time ago at Yellow Flower Ridge. Little White was also a python. Moreover, it was about to transform into a dragon, but it was killed by the heavenly tribulation. They are all pythons. Look at Little White. So cute. Why are these azure pythons more and more disgusting? Xiao Hua saw the 3 azure pythons fly out from a hidden place and unconsciously curled his lips. At this moment, the 3 azure pythons seemed to have a tacit understanding. Among them, 2 of the huge pythons swayed their tails and flew behind Xiao Hua, blocking Xiao Hua's path. In addition to the previous one, these 3 azure pythons actually blocked him from 3 different directions in the mountain forest. These 3 azure pythons' intelligence is not low. Xiao Hua was immediately shocked, and his heart was secretly on guard. Hiss! The 3 azure pythons hissed at the same time. A kind of aura similar to pressure came from the 3 azure pythons. Pressure. This is an azure python with the strength of a foundation establishment stage cultivator. Xiao Hua was horrified. Although this kind of pressure from a high-level cultivator towards a low-level cultivator was not as skillful, it still caused Xiao Hua to feel a burst of fear from the bottom of his heart. I'm afraid I'll have to try using the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua didn't think of running away when facing the 3 green pythons. Instead, he coveted them. First, he clapped his hand, summoning out Jing Chun. An earthen yellow light enveloped him from the top of his head. Then, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, wanting to see which green python he should start with. Woo, 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 3 muffled sounds could be heard. The 3 green pythons opened their mouths at the same time. A green wind blade was formed from the 3 pythons' mouths, rapidly spinning as it flew towards Xiao Hua. Oh my, it's not poisonous fog. Xiao Hua was shocked again. His figure swayed and flew between the 3 green pythons, wanting to dodge the wind blade. How could he have known that the wind blade was condensed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? It was even more powerful than ordinary magic tools. Moreover, under the urging of the green python's divine sense, how could Xiao Hua easily dodge it? After barely dodging a few times, a wind blade brushed past Xiao Hua's back, breaking the defensive yellow talisman on Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth. With a wave of his hand, he took out the great wisdom sword from the space. With a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal was once again raised in midair. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal reveal the might of a magic tool, tumbling in midair, the 3 green pythons seemed to know how powerful it was. For the time being, they ignored Xiao Hua and each spat out a wind blade to attack the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua's eyes revealed a cold light. He formed a seal and poured his magic power into the cloud-suppressing seal. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal, carrying a bronze luster, smashed towards one of the green pythons. Woo woo woo. That green python spat out wind blades with all its might, continuously hitting the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal. The other 2 green pythons also helped. A dozen wind blades actually stopped the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua poured his magic power into it, but he was unable to smash it down for a moment. Watch this, young master. Xiao Hua shouted loudly. His figure flew, and he quickly brandished the great wisdom sword, stabbing towards the nearest green python's vital point. Pop! A huge green shadow flashed by. This green python's tail was like a mountain as it smashed forward, blocking the front of the great wisdom sword. The scales on this green python's body were at least a foot long. When the great wisdom sword struck them, sparks flew. A fist-sized dent appeared on the scales. However, it was still unable to pierce through the scales. Hiss! That green python seemed to be in pain. When it hissed, the python's painful tail flipped again. With a bang, it hit the cloud-suppressing seal that was still tumbling in midair. The cloud-suppressing seal was tilted. As expected of foundation establishment strength. Formidable. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to spit out the great wisdom sword, a cold and gloomy divine sense ruthlessly swept over from the distance. Not good. There's an even more formidable one. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. These 3 green pythons with foundation establishment cultivation were already too much for him to handle. If there was an even more formidable one, wouldn't it be even more difficult to escape? Xiao Hua looked around. There were already many green pythons in the surroundings. Many of them were still flying back and forth in midair. However, because of the cloud-suppressing seal's might, they didn't dare to advance. Moreover, the sound of suwa-suwa and the sound of breaking air became louder. There were even more green pythons rushing over. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly formed seals with his hands and dove into the ground, escaping underground. Just as Xiaohua's figure disappeared, a small snake that was much smaller than ordinary green pythons flew over from the distance like lightning. This small snake was also green in color. There were some strange runes on its body. Its 8 fleshy wings were separated on both sides of its body. Moreover, on the snake's head, there was a small sarcoma that faintly resembled a crown. That small snake had already appeared. The 3 green pythons immediately very obediently descended from midair. All the other green pythons that were flying in midair also descended and very respectfully prostrated themselves on the ground. Immediately after, from the place where the small snake flew over, more than 10 huge pythons that were several times larger than the previous 3 green pythons flew over and surrounded the small snake. The small snake slightly circled the ground where Xiaohua had dove into, then raised its head to look in the direction where Xiaohua had escaped. It hissed twice, then shook its small tail and flapped its 8 fleshy wings. An afterimage streaked across the sky and flew back into the depths of the mountain forest. Soon after, the group of huge pythons also gradually swam back into the thick fog like a tide. Extremely far away, Qian Diheng, who was flying in midair, had a pale face. As if he had seen a ghost, he howled, "Junior brother Xiao, what kind of spirit beast did you provoke? Just its divine sense was able to injure us?" -8. Chapter 1723. Just as Xiaohua escaped from the ground far away, he did not dare to hesitate and called Sun Shu and the other 2 to flee. However, after a wave of divine sense swept over, the 4 of them simultaneously stopped in midair. Their Naiwen palace felt as if it was pierced by a sharp awl, excruciating pain. Xiaohua was slightly better. His divine sense was not in his Naiwen palace, but in the Buddha Sarira's Naiwen palace. A burst of golden light flowed from the Buddha Sarira, blocking the pain by quite a bit. However, it still caused Xiaohua to fall by more than a foot. Qian Diheng and the other 2 were in an even more sorry state. Each of them fell by more than 3 to 4 zhang. Furthermore, the 4 of them were all pale. It was obvious that their divine sense was heavily injured. Qian Diheng naturally could not help but cry out. However, the 4 of them did not dare to stay any longer. Each of them endured the pain of their divine sense and activated their magic power. Only after flying a few hundred li in one breath did Qian Diheng dare to speak. "Big brother, do you think I wanted to?" Xiaohua took a deep breath and tried his best to operate the exquisite leaf scripture, wanting to reduce the pain of his divine sense. He bitterly smiled and said, "Little brother only wanted to attract a few green pythons. Who would have thought that it would actually attract 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation?" Foundation Establishment Cultivation? Sun Shu's face was also pale. However, this paleness had a few traces of redness, adding a few points to her beauty. That's not too possible, right? Green pythons are only first-rank spiritual beasts. What is there to be suspicious about, Senior Sun? Xiaohua said. Little brother's cloud-suppressing seal was almost unable to smash it down. Furthermore, from the green python's bodies, there was an aura similar to that of Foundation Establishment cultivators. The thing that damaged our divine sense shouldn't be these 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation, right? Kuan Fian bit his lips and said, "It shouldn't be. However, little brother doesn't know if it's the green pythons." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Little brother even wanted to kill a Foundation Establishment green python. Who would have thought that before I even made a move, this divine sense appeared? Little brother knew that I was not its opponent and hurriedly escaped. Now, I feel that I was really lucky. If not for little brother's alertness, or if the divine sense attack came too late, little brother is afraid that little brother would not be able to escape. Could it be that the green python in the Liqian mountain range has mutated?" Qian Diheng asked curiously. "Even if it's the green python king, it's said that its cultivation base is only at the early stage of Foundation establishment. How could it possibly have the means to attack with divine sense? That must be the case. Little brother only saw a dozen or so green pythons at the early Foundation establishment stage. Could it be that they are all green python kings? Xiao Hua said fiercely. Junior brother Xiao, you've worked hard. Sun Shu looked at Xiao Hua with watery eyes. Our miscalculation put junior martial brother Xiao in a dangerous situation. If it weren't for junior martial brother's incredible speed, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to return to the mountain and answer to martial uncle helplessness. With that, he slapped his hand and took out his bag of holding. This azure python. I'll give junior brother another 20%. Senior sister Sun said it very well. This brother will also let junior brother Xiao have a few. Qian Diheng grinned and said, Don't. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. Looking at the three people, he felt warm in his heart. Little brother took a lot just now. If I take too much of this thing, it won't be of much use. Little brother is inexperienced. Coming out with you all, I'm happy to be able to help senior brother and senior sister a little. If senior sisters and senior brothers feel that you owe little brother anything, just think of little brother first if there's any good things in the future. All right. Qian Diheng smiled. We could have returned the favor by taking some stinky snakes, but you suddenly raised it so high. Forget it. Who asked junior martial brother Xiao to be so benevolent? If there's any good things in the future, this brother will think of you first. Many thanks senior brother Qian. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Forget it, we also agree. Sun Shu glanced at Kuan Fian and said at the same time, Right, little brother has a question now. Xiao Hua smiled. This divine sense attack method, does our Imperial Thunder sect have it? My Heavenly Thunder Palace has it, Qian Diheng replied. However, it's said that it's a technique used by Golden Core Stage seniors. Moreover, only seniors with exceptionally strong divine senses can use it. Yes, my Heavenly Thunder Palace also seems to have it, Kuan Fian continued. However, it doesn't seem to be as strong as that divine sense just now. If that divine sense was the Green Python King's, it should be a spiritual beast's innate ability. Naturally, it's stronger than us cultivators who forcibly cultivate it. Sun Shu explained. If junior martial brother Xiao is interested in this, you can look for it in the Dawn Rain continent. This kind of technique is extremely rare. Just relying on the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm afraid it's hard to get it. Isn't that enough? Senior brothers and sisters, if you come across this kind of technique, the first person you think of is little brother? Xiao Hua smiled. AI, you're thinking too much. Qian Diheng said without any trace of politeness, This brother still wants to cultivate it. Can't you just let little brother take a look? Xiao Hua said pitifully. No, of course not. Io. Qian Diheng laughed loudly. His body suddenly swayed, and he hugged his head with both hands, almost falling from midair again. Sun Shu smiled bitterly. This divine sense isn't easy to recover. Let's hurry ahead and find a secluded place to rest for a few days first. 10 days later, Xiao Hua and the other three flew out from the hidden place. They found a new direction and passed through the edge of the Liqian mountain range, rushing to Jiangqing City. This time, even the most curious and least afraid Qian Diheng was a lot more well-behaved. He didn't want to stir up trouble and get any benefits. Qian Diheng originally thought that his cultivation was the worst, but after all, he had a magic treasure to protect himself. Moreover, he had a new halberd. Even if he couldn't attack, he could at least protect himself, right? However, the spiritual beast's innate ability was so powerful that it could directly attack divine senses, making it impossible to guard against. If a first-grade spiritual beast was already like this, then what about second- and third-grade spiritual beasts? Keeping one's tail between one's legs and honestly protecting one's life, then looking for an opportunity to build a foundation was the right way. Of course, the Liqian mountain range was definitely not a good place. Although Xiao Hua and the others were more careful, they still bumped into a few second-grade spiritual beasts. For example, the three-winged frost ladybug, a fist-sized second-grade spiritual beast that looked no different from an ordinary ladybug. Xiao Hua and the others threw out a lot of fireball talismans to escape. Fortunately, there was only one three-winged frost ladybug. If there was a group of them like the green python, the four of them would cry to the heavens and the earth. When the four of them flew out of the range of the Liqian mountain range, they were already in a sorry state. When their divine senses swept over and saw that there were already people in front of them, they were greatly relieved. Senior Sister Sun, if I remember correctly, we should be at Mingsue Mountain in 10 days. Jiangqing City is about 1,000 miles to the west of Mingsue Mountain, Qian Diheng said with a smile. Sun Shu pursed her lips and smiled. Exactly. There is no teleportation formation from here to Jiangqing City. We still have to fly for 10 days. Calculating the time, it should be about time. Let's rest while we fly. That's the way it should be, Kuan Fian also said. Along the way, there are signs of human habitation. Other than the people of the secular world, there are also some small cultivation families. It's not worth mentioning. Only Mingsue Mountain's Lingpei mountain range has some fame. It's a side courtyard of the Lonely sect. By the time we get there, we'll have already recovered. Mingsue Mountain? Xiao Hua frowned slightly. He seemed to have heard this name from somewhere before, but when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember. When Kuan Fian mentioned the Lonely sect, Xiao Hua suddenly realized that this Lonely sect's name should be something he heard people mention in Jinghua City. It was when he entered Jinghua City that a cultivator directly flew over his head. Some people said that it was the Lonely sect's third elder, called Reverend Zhuo Ming, who was said to be a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator. Since he thought of this, Xiao Hua thought of the origin of Mingsue Mountain. Of course, it was Shi Wuming, who half gifted and half sold him the Devil Spear Point. Shi Wuming claimed to be a cultivator from Mingsue Mountain. When he took Xiao Hua's storage pouch, he'd even said that Xiao Hua could use his name to do something for him. Although it wasn't that long ago, Xiao Hua was now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, and his cultivation level was comparable to the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He had long cast this matter aside. If it weren't for Mingsue Mountain and Jinghua City, Xiao Hua wouldn't have remembered it. Could it be that we'll meet Senior Shi again? Xiao Hua thought of that strange cultivator and felt a trace of gratitude in his heart. That Devil Spear Point had saved Xiao Hua's life many times in the past. It was only after he obtained the Devil Hammer that he stopped using it. Let's go. It's basically safe in front of us. We just need to pay attention to cover our tracks. Qian Diheng began to speak carelessly again. Thus, Xiao Hua and the other three put on their camouflage cloaks and flew southwest using their flying technique. They didn't speak a word along the way. On the 9th day, they saw a vast expanse of green in front of them. It was actually a boundless grassland. On the grassland, there were many shepherds, riding horses of various colors, herding flocks of sheep that looked like white clouds. Occasionally, there would be a few columns of smoke rising into the sky. It was quite the scenery outside the Great Wall. Looking into the distance, in the depths of the grassland, there was an extremely tall emerald green mountain, like a piece of jade growing in the water. Needless to say, that should be Mingsue Mountain. After flying into the grassland and seeing Mingsue Mountain, Xiao Hua and the others flew slightly to the west. On the evening of the 10th day, in the depths of the grassland, a small town with a radius of dozens of miles appeared. This small town looked somewhat dilapidated. It was surrounded by dilapidated mud walls, as if it was built as a city wall. However, after a long time, it was inevitable that some of it would collapse and some of it would be broken down. The inside and outside of the mud walls were a little spacious. There were some tent-like buildings piled up in the surroundings. These tents were seen many times in the grassland. They should have been built by the residents of the small town. Looking further into the small town, there were some commonly seen buildings, some small courtyards, and some continuous ordinary houses. Moreover, the styles of these buildings were clearly different. It seemed that people from all over the place had gathered here. We'll go down. Sun Shu's divine sense swept over and waved his hand. The four of them landed not far from Jiangqing town. -8. Chapter 1724. Junior brothers, please wait a moment. Xiao Hua and the others landed on the ground. Kuan Fian smiled and clapped his hands, taking out a sound transmission talisman and said, "It's close to the appointed time. That fellow must have arrived." Wait for I to call him out. But where Kuan Fian's spiritual power was activated, that yellow talisman turned into a red light and flew into the air. It only circled in the air for a moment, then fell back down. Seeing that the sound transmission talisman didn't fly out, Kuan Fian's face changed slightly and said curiously, "Could it be that fellow hasn't arrived yet?" Then, Kuan Fian kept the sound transmission talisman and took out a thunder sound transmission talisman. He muttered something, and then activated his spiritual power. That thunder sound transmission talisman flew into the air and let out a faint thunder roar. That's right, this thunder sound transmission talisman was the same as the sound transmission talisman, spinning in the air and falling down, turning into a yellow talisman and floating in front of Kuan Fian's eyes.
Strange.
Sun Shu also said curiously, "Could it be that this fellow didn't come at all?" Xiao Hua knew that this thunder sound transmission talisman was more powerful than the usual 1,000-mile sound transmission talisman. Any cultivator within 2,000 to 3,000 miles could receive it with the secret technique of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Since Kuan Fian's thunder sound transmission talisman couldn't be sent out, that meant that the cultivator who sent the message to Kuan Fian wasn't nearby at all. Yes, could it be that there's a cat in this world that doesn't eat fish? Qian Diheng smacked his lips, looking at the distant Jiangcheng town, and said curiously. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he said warily, "Senior Kuan, could it be that there's a trap here?" Kuan Fian thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. "We're just cultivators of the qi refining stage, and we don't have any treasures on us. Moreover, we're just here to travel what other people can do to us. Moreover, we're disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. It's not like that fellow doesn't know. He wouldn't dare to have any evil intentions towards us." Seeing that Kuan Fian had such a good feeling, Xiao Hua didn't say anything. He had been a loose cultivator before. Although he wasn't as vicious and merciless as other loose cultivators, but if there was really something at stake, he definitely wouldn't put the name of the Imperial Thunder Sect or Shanghua Sect in his eyes. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't feel any fear in his heart when he arrived here. He knew that there wouldn't be any danger, so he didn't say anything else. Perhaps this fellow Taoist has encountered something and is unable to come? Sun Shu smiled and said, "This condensed knowledge treasure is so precious. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If there's nothing big, I'll definitely come." "Hehe, do you still need to say it? He must have died," Qian Diheng said while blinking his eyes. "Junior brothers, please wait for a moment. I will go with junior sister Sun to take a look." Kuan Fian pulled on Sun Shu's sleeve and said to Xiao Hua and Qian Diheng, "And, senior sisters, please be careful." Xiao Hua nodded. When Kuan Fian and Sun Shu's figures disappeared, Qian Diheng said in a low voice, "Junior brother Xiao, I thought you brought the cloud-suppressing seal to the workshop to refine it again. I didn't expect that it wasn't the case. The thing you sent to the workshop, is it also a magic treasure?" From the time they met the Green Python to Jiangcheng City, along the way, Xiao Hua saw Qian Diheng several times and wanted to ask him, but every time he wanted to say something but stopped. He didn't know what he wanted to say. Now that he heard it, he smiled bitterly in his heart and asked, "Senior brother Qian, what's the difference if it's a magic treasure or not? About a year later, I'll return the crafting workshop's token to you." Qian Diheng smiled and said, "Actually, I don't want to know anything about you. It's just that, you see, I only have one halberd that I can take out. It really doesn't match the magic treasure on me. If junior brother has any extra magic treasure, do you think you can let me take advantage of it first?" "Oh, junior brother, don't worry. I won't shortchange you of spirit stones. Even if it's some cultivation method, only I can find it, I'll definitely give it to you." "Hehe, so it's like that." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Senior brother Qian, you're lacking. How rare are magic treasures? It's already a great fortune for me to get one magic treasure. How can I have more?" "Hehe, junior brother, I know you used to be a loose cultivator. You must have some connections. If you have any good things in the future, don't forget me." Qian Diheng was a little disappointed, but still said in a low voice. Looking at Qian Diheng's I know expression, Xiao Hua could only rub his nose and smile apologetically. Senior brother Qian should also know how this little brother's cloud-suppressing seal came about. Forget it, there's no need to say more. If I have any good things in the future, I'll think of you first. Good junior brother. Ha ha ha. Qian Diheng patted Xiao Hua's shoulder and laughed happily. This cultivation sect's disciples' communication method is really extraordinary. Xiao Hua sighed secretly, but he also laughed secretly. If he had a good magic treasure, the first one he would think of would be Qian Diheng, but the first one he would give would be his senior brother Xiangyang. After that, Qian Diheng didn't say anything more. The two of them sat cross-legged on a hill in the grassland and adjusted their breathing. Unexpectedly, they waited for more than 2 hours. When the sun above the grassland was in the west and a cold wind blew, Kuan Fian and Sun Shu returned. Seeing their different expressions, Xiao Hua felt strange. Qian Diheng asked, "What's wrong? Is there any news?" Kuan Fian's face was full of indifference. He raised his head and said, "There's good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" "Naturally the good news." Qian Diheng laughed. The good news is that the small trade gathering will be held in 3 days. We've come just in time. Then what's the bad news? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Could it be that they want some token? Hee, junior brother Xiao is really experienced and knowledgeable. That's exactly it. Sun Shu frowned and said, "It's the same as what senior sister Kuan got. There's a Lingpei mountain villa in Jiangqing City. If you don't have a token from the villa, you can't enter the trade gathering." Isn't that simple? Qian Diheng laughed and said, "We just need to see who's participating in the trade gathering. Then we can ask nicely. If not, that token has a mark. It belongs to whoever it's given to. Others can't replace it." Sun Shu said angrily. So cautious? Qian Diheng was speechless. There's a treasure inside. Sun Shu smiled bitterly. If we're not cautious, can we succeed? Just the 3 words treasure is enough to attract all the cultivators below the gold core stage in the auction in Chiu City. Just Lingpei Mountain Villa. Can it bear it? Kuan Fian laughed coldly. It doesn't matter if you don't have a token. When I get there, I'll directly take out the name of the Imperial Thunder Sect. I don't believe that a small Lingpei Mountain Villa won't give my Imperial Thunder Sect face. -8. Chapter 1725. 3 days later, a bright moon hung in the night sky. The grassland's night sky was unusually clear, and the stars scattered around the moon. "It's time, let's go." Kuan Fian floated up from the ground, his face expressionless. Waiting for Sun Shu and the others to get up, Xiao Hua waved his hand and dozens of shiny talismans flew from the ground. It was the array that Xiao Hua had set up. During this period of time, although Xiao Hua didn't stop studying the rabbit talisman, he also had some gains. But because Sun Shu and the others were by his side, he didn't make any new talismans, so the array was still the original array. But Xiao Hua's method of setting up the array was getting more and more skillful, and he even faintly felt that there were other arrays in his memory that were about to be recovered. Xiao Hua kept the talismans and put on the camouflage, and followed the 3 of them to fly towards Jiangqing City. Although Jiangqing City was on the grassland, because the buildings were relatively simple, the area was huge, and it was actually half the size of Weeping Moon City. In the northeast of Jiangqing City, there was a place with bright lights. It was a manor that occupied a large area. Under the night sky, under the moonlight, there was an archway with the words Lingpei Mountain Villa written on it. Under the archway, there were dozens of boys in Taoist robes. They were all about the 4th or 5th level of qi refining. All of them had bright eyes and stood with their hands behind their backs. Xiao Hua and the others landed on the ground. Looking at the deserted, decorated archway, they walked over. When the servants saw the cultivators coming, 2 of them hurriedly came forward to greet them. They bowed and said, "Greetings to the 4 seniors. May I know why the 4 seniors have come to my Lingpei Mountain Villa?" "We are here to participate in the spirit gathering. Please lead us." Kuan Fian walked in front and said in a deep voice, "We welcome the 4 seniors to participate in the spirit gathering. Please show us your tokens." The slightly taller boy said respectfully, "We are the disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. We came in a hurry and didn't have any tokens." Kuan Fian clapped his hands and took out the token of the Imperial Thunder Sect and handed it over. "This is the token of the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples. Show it to your master." The Imperial Thunder Sect? The boy was obviously surprised. He looked at the other boy and was at a loss. Although the other boy was short, he had an extraordinary bearing. After being stunned for a moment, he immediately bowed and said, "So it's a senior from the Imperial Thunder Sect. This junior really admires the reputation of your sect. To be able to meet a senior from the Imperial Thunder Sect is truly a blessing for this junior." Kuan Fei Yin smiled. However, the boy immediately changed the topic and said, "However, the order I received was to check the tokens of the Lingji gathering. The four of you don't have the tokens of my Lingpei Mountain Manor, so I don't dare to let you in. Seniors, please wait here for a moment. Junior will take Senior's token and go in. Let's see what the Manor Lord decides." Go. Kuan Fian's face was a little unhappy as he threw his command medallion to the boy and said impatiently, "Senior, please wait a moment." The boy took the command medallion, turned around, and left quickly. Not long after, a cultivator around 40 years old hurried over. The messenger boy wasn't behind him, and this cultivator's expression was very busy. It was obvious that he left the boy behind and rushed over himself. Seeing the expression of this cultivator, who was also at the 12th level of Qi refining, Kuan Fian was secretly pleased. That cultivator went forward and handed over Kuan Fian's command medallion. He said respectfully, "I am Ming Chui Mountain Manor's disciple, Chu Ming. Seniors from the Imperial Thunder Sect are here, so this junior didn't welcome you from afar. Sorry for making senior laugh." Although Kuan Fian was arrogant, but seeing that he was also a cultivator of the same level, he quickly took his command medallion and bowed as well. "Fellow Chu is too polite. I am also at the 12th level of Qi refining. I don't deserve to be called senior. It's better to call me fellow." Hearing that, Chu Ming's heart relaxed, but he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said respectfully, "No matter what, since you are from the Imperial Thunder Sect, you are giving face to my Ling Pei Mountain Manor. I will welcome you." However, without waiting for Kuan Fian to speak again, Chu Ming changed the topic like the boy earlier. "It's just that the Ling Pei Mountain Manor's Lingji meeting this time is a private meeting between the disciples of my Ming Chui Mountain Manor and the Lanli sect. There are some secrets in this, so only those who have the token can enter. Since you don't have the token," Chu Ming didn't finish his words, but his meaning was very obvious. He was waiting for Kuan Fian to leave by himself. "Lanli sect?" Kuan Fian said softly, "Lanli sect and my Imperial Thunder sect are on good terms. Usually, if there are any matters between the two sects, we will also communicate with the Lanli sect fellow Taoist. I'm very sorry, there is indeed a secret to this Lingji gathering. Otherwise, my Lingpei Mountain Villa would definitely open its doors and invite the four of you in." No matter what Kuan Fian said, Chu Ming replied apologetically, "Fellow, are you not giving face to my Imperial Thunder sect?" Kuan Fian said with a cold smile, "Isn't it just a condensed knowledge treasure? It's not like my Imperial Thunder sect hasn't seen it before." Chu Ming's eyes narrowed. Although he didn't say anything cold, his tone had already changed. "Since you know that there is a condensed knowledge treasure, you naturally know the stakes. My Lanli sect didn't invite many of our own disciples. How can outer sect disciples casually enter? It's just a small Ling Pei Mountain Manor." Qin Hung at the side was also a little angry. Could it be that it's even harder to enter than Lanli sect's Limo Ridge? "I don't know if it's hard or not. I have always walked through the door." Chu Ming also sneered. "If you want to know, you can try to enter. However, if there are any mishaps, don't blame I for not warning you first." Seeing that things had turned bad and seeing Chu Ming's fearless look, Kuan Fian was a little dumbfounded. Although they didn't take off the fog, but not only did the Imperial Thunder sect lose face, even her own heart was extremely tangled. Just as both sides were in a deadlock and Kuan Fian was riding a tiger and couldn't get off, Xiaohua, who was standing at the back, walked up and cupped his hands. "Fellow Chu, how should I address Ming Chui Mountain Senior Shi Wuming?" "Senior Shi is I's martial uncle." Chu Ming's face softened and nodded. "However, even if you are acquainted with martial uncle Shi, I'm afraid that today's matter won't work." It's like this." Xiaohua smiled and said, "Senior Shi once owed Junior a favor. That day, He once said that this poor Taoist can use his name to do something. Of course, this matter cannot be against reason and nature. This poor Taoist feels that this is the right time, right? Chu Ming thought for a moment and nodded slightly. Martial Uncle Shi's disciple. I have also given him a token. If what you say is true, I can help Martial Uncle Shi return the favor. However, where is Martial Uncle Shi's token? Fellow can use Martial Uncle Shi's token as a token for this matter. I can also use Martial Uncle Shi's token to report back. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said without hesitation, Senior, she only said one sentence. He didn't give I a token. Haha, fellow says it so easily. Since you don't have a token, then aren't you just saying it for nothing? I's Martial Uncle Shi is also not in Ling Pei Mountain Villa. There's no proof. Chu Ming laughed. AI, there's no other way. Xiao Hua sighed. That day, Senior Shi said so. If Ming Chui Mountain doesn't care about I, there's nothing I can do. Then, Xiao Hua turned to Chu Ming and was about to speak when Chu Ming's smile deepened. Haha, fellow, just now I was just testing. Martial Uncle Shi, cough cough, often like this. May I know where you saw Martial Uncle Shi? What was his appearance like? This time, Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that Shi Wuming was just talking nonsense. Now it seems that Senior Shi really has this habit. Xiao Hua took a step forward and described Shi Wuming's appearance to Chu Ming. He then transmitted a message to Chu Ming about what happened that day. Naturally, Chu Ming wanted to examine the demonic spear tip. Xiao Hua took it out from his space and handed it over. Haha, no need, no need. Chu Ming saw that the magic spear tip didn't even take it. He waved his hand and said, I have seen this thing before. Hee, and this matter, I also know about it. So it was the fellow from the Imperial Thunder sect who bought this thing. Chu Ming looked at the magic spear tip with a strange expression. Even his words were strange. Since it was you who took this thing, Martial Uncle Shi's favor is understandable. Fellow Taoist, please keep it well. Xiao Hua was confused. However, since Chu Ming admitted it, his goal was achieved. Sure enough, after Xiao Hua kept the magic spear tip, Chu Ming clapped his hands and smiled. Since Martial Uncle Shi has done us a favor, the four of you can participate in the Spirit Ji gathering. However, I would like to ask the four of you to take down the mystic insect. Xiao Hua and the others kept the mystic insect and greeted Chu Ming again. Chu Ming saw that the four of them were at Qi refining stage level 12 and knew that they were here for the foundation establishment stage. He didn't ask any more questions and personally led the four of them into Ling Pei Mountain Villa. For fellow cultivators, please. Chu Ming led the four of them into a hall. Inside the hall, there was already a good number of cultivators. Without exception, all of them were energy refining stage cultivators. Additionally, it was clear that many of them were familiar with each other. Whispers could be heard within the hall, as many of them were discussing something. When these cultivators saw Chu Ming leading the four Qi refining stage cultivators in, they stopped and looked at the four of them in surprise. Chu Ming didn't explain and led Xiao Hua and the others to a table near the center. He raised his hand and said, For fellow cultivators, please sit. The Spirit Ji gathering will begin in half an hour. I hope the four of you are fated to be here. Thank you, fellow cultivator Chu. Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. Hee, no need to thank me. If you want to calculate, I have taken advantage of you. Chu Ming cupped his hands and quickly left. After Chu Ming left, the hall was silent for a moment. Then, it gradually became louder. A cultivator not far from Xiao Hua looked at the four of them and walked forward. He cupped his hands and said, I am Ming Yang. Which branch of my Lonely sect are you from? Forgive me for my poor eyesight, but I have never seen it before. -8. Chapter 1726. Seeing that Ming Yang was also at Qi refining stage 12, Xiao Hua smiled and said, I and the other three are disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect, and we're just passing by Jiangqing City. Since Ling Pei Mountain Villa has such a grand event, I also came to try my luck. When Ming Yang heard Xiao Hua's words of trying his luck, his expression changed and he said in shock, How is this possible? The Spirit Ji meeting is a strictly guarded secret of the Blue Li sect. How did you Imperial Thunder sect disciples know about it? Meng Yang's voice was quite loud, and the people around heard it too. They immediately stopped talking. Many people in the hall were already paying attention. Now that they saw the commotion, they became silent again. How did the four of you get the news? Meng Yang's eyes narrowed as he looked around and said, We haven't found the opportunity for the Blue Li sect disciples, so we didn't ask the outer sect disciples to come and find it. That's right. The disciples of the various branches of the Blue Li sect all shouted. How could Kuan Fian explain this to them? His eyes were full of disdain, and he didn't say a word. The arrogance of the Imperial Thunder sect disciples was obvious. Fellow cultivator, there are some things that I still have to say. Otherwise, it will be very disadvantageous for you. Meng Yang seemed to have some grudges with the Imperial Thunder sect. Seeing that no one spoke, he sneered. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and smiled. We are here to participate in the Spirit G meeting. We don't have any intention of snatching the opportunity from your sect's disciples, and this opportunity to condense the treasure can only be unique. If it is your sect's disciples' opportunity, we can only clap and congratulate him. Do you think we will snatch it? You actually know about the treasure? Another disciple was even more shocked. Not only that, I came with the permission of Senior Shi Wuming to participate. Xiao Hua said coldly. Hearing that Xiao Hua was Shi Wuming in advance, everyone shrunk their necks and looked at each other. Meng Yang was also quite embarrassed and forced a smile. Since you are Marshal Uncle Shi's guest, just say it directly. Why hide it? Xiao Hua glanced at him and closed his eyes to rest. The Blue Li sect disciples around them started to whisper again. After a while, a few more disciples gradually entered the hall. They were all around the 11th layer of qi condensation. At the head of the hall, there was a table that had been empty all this time. No cultivators sat there. Almost an hour later, they heard the sound of footsteps followed by the sound of rustling clothes. Xiao Hua and the others looked up and saw an early-stage foundation building cultivator leading several disciples around the 11th layer of the aura refining realm into the hall. Greetings, Senior Hu. Greetings, Manor Lord Hu. The group of cultivators stood up. Xiao Hua and the others looked at each other and also stood up. Disciples, please have a seat. Manor Master Hu walked to the table at the head of the table. His gaze turned and paused on Xiao Hua and the others. Then he said, This humble manor is fortunate enough to hold this gathering for the future of my Lonely sect. Perhaps some disciple will have this opportunity. If this disciple can come out of my Ling Pei Mountain Villa, I hope that you will take care of my Ling Pei Mountain Villa in the future. Of course, the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples are lucky enough to have this opportunity. I welcome the arrival of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciples. Thank you, Manor Lord Hu. Xiao Hua and the others didn't dare to neglect and said in unison, All right, I won't say any more. This condensed treasure has already been tried. I have no fate with it. I's disciples haven't tried it yet. They will try it with everyone. Hearing that the Ling Pei Mountain Villa's disciples haven't tried it, the group of disciples showed respect on their faces. They smiled and said, Manor Lord who is truly righteous. You are a capable disciple of my Lonely sect. Junior and the others admire you. Haha, disciples think too highly of I. Manor Master Hu laughed and waved his hand. The disciples behind him all sat at the head table. He then said, I'll invite fellow Taoist fan over. Let's see who among the disciples here has the opportunity. Thank you, Manor Lord Hu. Everyone bowed again. Manor Head, who had only been gone for half the time it took to brew a cup of tea when he returned with a cultivator who was also in the early stage of foundation establishment. The cultivator was not tall and looked very simple and honest. He had thick eyebrows and a dark face. He looked just like a farmer. Manor Lord Hu led Fanqingmu to the main hall and said with a smile, Disciples, this is Senior Fanqingmu. He is a good friend of I. This time, he came to my Ling Pei Mountain Villa because of I, Junior's greet Senior Fan. The disciples naturally respectfully saluted. Fanqingmu's tone was very cold. He waved his hand and said, Since you are all Manor Lord Hu's juniors and Manor Lord Hu has gathered all of you here, then Manor Lord Hu has already considered you all as his own nephews. Since we have such a relationship, I won't be polite. There's no need for any of the so-called etiquette. Today's matter was facilitated by Manor Lord Hu and gave all of you this opportunity. In I's opinion, no matter who has the opportunity or not, they must remember Manor Lord whose intentions and remember them in their hearts. We understand. It is because of Manor Lord whose righteousness that we have this opportunity. The disciples all said in unison. Xiao Hua slightly frowned and glanced at Sun Shu and the others. Sure enough, the three of them had a strange expression. Of course, from the current situation, this wasn't a spirit gathering, it was more like a loyalty gathering. Haha, I's intention was to give all of you a chance. I didn't think too much about it. Manor Lord who said with a red face. At this moment, a red light flew over. It was a voice transmission talisman. When Manor Lord whose divine sense swept over it, his heart thumped. He thought to himself, this guy? Why did he rush over at this time? However, Manor Lord whose expression didn't change. He said, all right, I won't say any more. I'm sure all of you are already anxious, right? As he said that, he patted his hand and took out a disc array from his storage bag. I will open the seal in the hall. For such an important matter, it's better to keep it a secret. Manor Master who tapped the disc array with his hand and several orange-red threads of light flew out from the disc array. The threads of light drew an arc in the air and landed at the four corners of the hall. The moment the threads of light landed, it was as though something had been ignited. Surging flames roared and engulfed the entire hall. Io. Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. However, when he looked at the calm Lanli sect disciples around him, he narrowed his eyes and released his divine sense. The surging flames quickly covered the entire hall. Just as the flames were about to close, a soft chi sound rang out and the flames in the hall disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Xiao Hua's divine sense was immediately repelled by the restrictions on the four walls of the hall and could no longer penetrate through. -8. Chapter 1727. All right, I'll leave for a moment. Manor Head who scanned the area with his divine sense and satisfaction. As he spoke, he pointed at the disc array and a similar thread of light shot out. Manor Head who followed the thread of light out of the hall. Xiao Hua looked at Manor Head who's back thoughtfully. But all the other disciples, including Kuren Fian and the other two, had their eyes focused on Fan Qingmu. Disciples. Fan Qingmu naturally understood what everyone was thinking. He clapped his hands, and a strange-looking magic tool appeared in his hands. That magic tool was like a turtle shell. Except for an opening in one place, everything else was tightly sealed. There was nothing special about it. Everyone scanned it with their divine sense, but couldn't penetrate it. I know what everyone is thinking. I will get straight to the point. The condensed knowledge treasure is in this Qing Wu. Which disciple has the opportunity to become the owner of the condensed knowledge treasure? You only need to reach your hand in and you will know. Fan Qingmu's voice sounded in the hall. However, before everyone tries, I have two requests. Xiao Hua retracted his gaze from where Manor Head who disappeared. Looking at the eagerness in Sun Shu's eyes, he transmitted his voice. Senior Sun, is what Senior Fan said correct? Just reach out and touch it. Can you be sure? Sun Shu's eyes flashed with excitement. She transmitted her voice with a smile. Exactly. That year, that senior from the Imperial Thunder Sect also coincidentally came to the Sun Thunder Palace for business and accidentally damaged the magic tool that contained the condensed knowledge treasure. When he touched the condensed knowledge treasure with his hand, the condensed knowledge treasure immediately seeped into his skin and all the realms were absorbed by him. This, Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Senior Sun, are you sure you're not telling a story? How can the condensed knowledge treasure be placed in a magic tool? Don't you know how to use a magic tool to protect it? Junior Xiao is different. The condensed knowledge treasure is important, but the problem is that the reincarnated disciple's cultivation is so high. If we use a magic tool to protect it, Golden Dan cultivators can't touch it. What's the use of the condensed knowledge treasure? Sun Shu smiled. As for all these coincidences, maybe it's heaven's will. Heaven's will? Xiao Hua shook his head. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will grow old. If the earth has no hatred, the earth will be peaceful. Illusory, Xiao Hua said casually, but as soon as his words reached Sun Shu, Xiao Hua's heart trembled. The karma hand in the air flickered slightly. Karma. 2 of the 3,000 great das. Perhaps karma doesn't just apply to one life. Even if it's 3 lives, the karma heavenly Tao will still work. After Xiao Hua comprehended this point, the hand of karma became a little clearer. On the other hand, Sun Shu's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion and a trace of tenderness. He looked at Xiao Hua and unconsciously muttered in his heart, "That's right. If the heavens have feelings, the heavens will also grow old. Why is there so much love in this world?" In the hall, Fan Xingmu's voice sounded, "My first condition is that every disciple must pay a piece of top-level spiritual stone before they try." This? Xiao Hua was stunned. Then the corners of his mouth curled up as he thought to himself, "This senior is really good at making money." But thinking about it, that was indeed the case. She had no reason to let him try anything. How could there be no benefit? This piece of top-grade spirit stone was probably because it was in Ling Pei Mountain Villa. If it was somewhere else, it would be even more. Senior Fan has worked so hard. We should be filial to you. At the head table, a disciple of Manor Master who stood up and said, "This junior is not talented, but I will help senior collect these spirit stones." Thank you for your trouble." Fan Xingmu squeezed out a smile from his face. Obviously, he knew this disciple, and the other disciples also knew him. Someone even handed over the spirit stones to him and said with a smile, "Thank you, Senior Brother Ling." Xiao Hua and the others didn't say anything. When Senior Brother Ling came over, they all handed over the spirit stones to him. After Senior Brother Ling collected the spirit stones from everyone in the hall and handed them to Fan Xingmu, Fan Xingmu accepted them without even looking and said, "My second condition is also very simple. Before you put your hand into the Qing Wu, you must make a blood oath that if any disciple is the owner of this treasure, you must do your best to help I step into the gold core stage." What? The Lonely sect disciples didn't know what they were thinking, but Xiao Hua and the others couldn't help but frown. Do your best to help him step into the gold core stage? Brothers and sisters. Senior Brother Ling, who just received the spirit stones, stood up and said, "Senior Brother Fan was lucky to be able to obtain this treasure. Naturally, he has some luck with the owner of this treasure. For him to take out the treasure for us to try is in itself a very righteous thing to do. Think about it. If one of your fellow disciples is the owner of this treasure, and Senior Brother Fan doesn't come at all, will this fellow disciple have the luck to reach the realm of his previous life? If this fellow disciple doesn't return Senior Brother Fan's favor, will he be able to break through the realm of his previous life and go further? Senior Brother Fan's condition is also to help this fellow disciple. Moreover, Senior Brother Fan also said that he will do his best. If this fellow disciple doesn't have the ability, then Senior Brother Fan's words are in vain. Senior Brother Fan is also leaving a lot of leeway for everyone." Xiao Hua and the others looked at each other, and there seemed to be some realization in each other's eyes. The matter of a meat pie falling from the sky has never happened before. If you want to get something, you must give something. Fan Xingmu's condition was inevitable. The Blue Li sect disciples in the hall pondered for a moment, and then someone shouted, "Senior Brother Fan is right. We only need to pay the price of 1 spirit stone to obtain the treasure. It is really easy. To help Senior Brother Fan step into the gold core stage is the obligation and price of the treasure's owner. I agree to make a blood oath." "Good. This fellow disciple, come over and try first." Fan Xingmu was overjoyed and pointed with a smile. "Yes, thank you, Senior Brother Fan." The disciple stepped forward and bowed. "Fellow disciple doesn't need to be like this. If you are the owner of the treasure, I will have to call you Senior Brother." Fan Xingmu patted the disciple's shoulder and forced a smile on his face. "I don't dare. If this disciple is fated, I will never forget Senior's grace." That disciple was very flattered and hurriedly discovered the blood oath. Then, with a trembling arm, he slowly extended a hand into the Qing Wu. Evidently, Fan Xingmu was also extremely concerned, his eyes fixed on that disciple's reaction. Unfortunately, after the disciple reached his hand in, he was first stunned, then at a loss. The previous anxiety had long disappeared. "Forget it. Fellow disciple, please take out your hand." Fan Xingmu was not surprised. He smiled naturally and said, It seems that you are not the owner of the treasure. But the disciple helplessly took out his hand. 3 of his fingers seemed to be still moving, as if he wanted to continue. The disciple also had something to say and wanted to argue. However, he looked at Fan Qingmu's appearance and then looked at the other disciples who had already walked behind him. He did not say the rest of his words. He turned around and walked back to his seat, sitting there in a daze. The disciple next to him naturally wanted to ask, but looking at the disciple's appearance and thinking that he would be able to touch the treasure soon, he did not ask anymore. Although there were many disciples in the hall, it was easy to reach into the treasure. In just half an hour, except for Xiao Hua and the other 3, all the disciples in the hall had tried. The entire hall was silent. No one spoke. If a needle fell to the ground, one could probably hear the sound. It was as if the air in the entire hall had condensed. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Xiao Hua sighed. He stood up and walked in front of Fan Qingmu. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect greets Senior Fan. Manner Master who just told I that the 4 of you are Senior Chu's favor. Senior Chu also has a favor for I, so I cannot refuse. Please." Fan Qingmu nodded slightly and said. Xiao Hua casually swore a blood oath, extending his hand into Qing Wu. Why is it so soft? Xiao Hua only felt that there was something slippery and soft at the place where his fingers touched. Very naturally, 2 of his fingers slightly pinched. And at the place where he pinched, that slippery thing was like liquid, sliding out from his fingers. A kind of coolness was produced. It seems that there is no reaction. Xiao Hua's eyes turned and thought very strangely. Little friend Xiao, you don't seem to be the owner of this treasure. Fan Qingmu smiled and said, "Please take out your finger." "Yes, Junior understands." Xiao Hua did not have much hope. Hearing Fan Qingmu's reminder, he took out his hand and looked between his fingers. There was no wet place. Immediately after, Kuren Fian, Qian Diheng, and Sun Shu each went forward to try. Without exception, there was no change. The disappointment on the faces of the 3 was needless to say. The faces of the Lanli sect disciples were also filled with joy. Forget it, Fan Qingmu clapped his hand and the treasure flew into the air. As he kept it in his storage bag, he raised his head and shouted, "Manner Master who, please open the enchantment." Among the disciples of Ling Pei Mountain Villa, except for a disciple at the 12th level of Qi refining who did not move, the others also stood up and walked towards the entrance of the hall. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. At the entrance, a ball of orange flame was produced. The flame condensed into the shape of a rocket. With a whoosh, it shot towards Fan Qingmu. Fan Qingmu was in the middle of putting away his storage bag, so he wasn't on guard at all. It was only when the fire arrow was about a foot in front of him that he realized it was coming. Fan Qingmu didn't have time to say anything. He formed a seal with his hand and waved it forward. A thunder palm appeared from his palm and struck the fire arrow. With a light kachut sound, the half-foot-long thunder palm hit the rocket. The orange flame was completely shattered and fell to the ground. "Manor Lord Hu, what do you mean by this?" Fan Qingmu's expression changed as he said coldly, "Do you want to leave this Ningji treasure behind?" -8. Chapter 1728. Manor Master Hu, don't you want the lives of your Lanli sect disciples? Fan Qingmu clapped his hand, and a magic weapon that looked like a crutch appeared in his hand. He sneered, "Moreover, I have made it clear that if you don't have I's spell, no one can open this Qing Wu, the condensed knowledge treasure inside. You can't get it." Who knew that it would have been better if Fan Qingmu didn't say that? As soon as his voice fell, more than a dozen orange-red brilliants flashed from around him. Each brilliance formed a fire arrow and shot towards Fan Qingmu's body at the same time. "Go!" Fan Qingmu's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. He released his pressure and filled the entire hall. Then, he waved his magic weapon again and several rotating brilliances came out from the crutch. They shot in different trajectories towards the Ling Pei Mountain Villa disciples who had walked to the entrance of the hall and were already alert. They took out their yellow talismans and prepared to defend themselves. Puff, 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 there were a series of muffled sounds. How could the Ling Pei Mountain Villa disciples' yellow talismans be a match for Fan Qingmu's magic weapon? They were easily broken by the brilliance. Moreover, the brilliance that pierced through the yellow talismans was like a sharp sword. It didn't lose its momentum and pierced towards every disciple's body. Kacha, just as the brilliance pierced the disciples' bodies, the brilliance on their bodies flickered and disappeared. Then, there was the sound of the brilliance shattering. The yellow talismans on their bodies couldn't withstand a single blow and were all pierced by the brilliance. The disciples without the yellow talismans were like chickens, waiting to be slaughtered under the pressure of a foundation establishment cultivator. Their bodies were easily pierced by the brilliance, and they didn't have any power to fight back. They all fell into a pool of blood. The disciple who was at the peak of the 12th level of Qi refining realm, who was sitting at the head table, just now didn't get up. Although there was some panic on his face, he wasn't as frightened as the surrounding disciples. When he collapsed to the ground, he clapped his hands and a small triangular flag was pinched in his hand. Fan Qingmu killed several disciples of Ling Pei Mountain Villa. He glanced around and saw the situation in the hall clearly. However, the dozens of fire arrows that were shot out from the array in the hall had already flown in front of him. He didn't have time to chase after the other Lanli sect disciples. Fan Qingmu sneered. He really didn't understand what Manor Head Who meant. However, since he dared to come to Ling Pei Mountain Villa, he naturally had a plan to deal with it. He clapped his hand again, and a ruler-like celestial artifact appeared from his storage bag. As he activated his spiritual power, it quickly flew above his head. Immediately, a yellow brilliance emitted from the ruler. In the blink of an eye, it protected Fan Qingmu's body. At this moment, the fire arrow that was flying towards him had only flown half a foot forward. Fan Qingmu's eyes narrowed as he saw his magic item protecting him. He waved the magic item in his hand once more, and several dozen rays of light spun out to meet the fire arrows. Pa 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 pa, a series of crisp sounds could be heard. Flames flashed around Fan Qingmu like fireworks, but they were also annihilated. Haha, Manor Head Who, if you don't show up, how can you be I's opponent with just the array in this hall? Fan Qingmu laughed heartily. He cast his gaze towards the many disciples in the hall. Under his pressure, everyone, including the 4 disciples from the Imperial Lightning sect, had collapsed to the ground. They looked at him with pale faces, their eyes filled with horror and fear. Although Fan Qingmu's magic item produced a lot of brilliance, it was only an attack after all. In addition to 70% of the fire arrows being destroyed, 30% of the fire arrows leaped out from the gaps in the brilliance and shot straight at his protective light curtain. Pa pa pa, just as Fan Qingmu's gaze was wandering, several fire arrows shot at the light curtain. Without exception, they couldn't break through the protection of the light curtain and turned into fireworks that fell to the ground. Therefore, Fan Qingmu threw away his last bit of vigilance and sneered. Since Manor Head Who is so heartless, don't blame I for being unrighteous. I will kill all of your descendants in Ling Pei Mountain Villa. As he spoke, he waved the magic item in his hand again and again. Many rays of brilliance flashed like sharp swords and shot at the many disciples who collapsed in the hall. Suddenly, screams sounded in the hall. One by one, the lives of the Lanli sect disciples were easily taken by Fan Qingmu. The 4 disciples of Imperial Thunder sect naturally collapsed to the ground and couldn't move. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and calmly observed. Not only was the cloud-suppressing seal eager to try, but the mighty Vajra celestial body hidden in his body could come out at any time to resist Fan Qingmu's pressure. Fortunately, Fan Qingmu knew the origin of Xiao Hua and the others. He seemed to have a lingering fear, or perhaps he had other plans. When he waved his magic item, he missed the 4 of them. Since that was the case, Xiao Hua didn't want to create more trouble and didn't want to get involved in the grudge between the Lanli sect and Fan Qingmu. He only allowed Fan Qingmu to kill the disciples of the Lanli sect, while he carefully took precautions. However, just when Fan Qingmu took control of the entire hall, another change suddenly occurred. Most of the fire arrows that were shot at Fan Qingmu's protective light curtain fell to the ground. It was obvious that their power was not enough to break through the defense of the light curtain. However, just when Fan Qingmu shifted his attention away and focused on killing the disciples of the Lanli sect, the moment one of the fire arrows touched the light curtain, the flame on the fire arrow disappeared and revealed its original form. It was actually a slender magic item in the shape of a rhombus. The sharp tip of the rhombus magic item had a faint blue light flickering. Moreover, there were also faint runes flowing around the magic item. Puff! The moment the flames disappeared, the rhombus-shaped celestial artifact suddenly raised its head like an awakened green python and rushed towards the light screen. The light screen that had blocked the numerous fire arrows only lasted for a moment before the rhombus-shaped celestial artifact's blue tip corroded a hole in it. The rhombus-shaped celestial artifact easily flew through the hole and pierced straight towards Fan Qingmu's heart. Ah? Fan Qingmu was alarmed when he sensed that the light screen of his Dharma artifact had been broken. He quickly formed a seal with his free hand and sent a thunder palm toward the rhombus-shaped Dharma artifact. Crack! The thunder palm struck, but the rhombus-shaped Dharma artifact seemed to have a mind of its own. With a slight twist, it bypassed the thunder palm. This is bad. Only then did Fan Qingmu realize that something was wrong. He hurriedly slapped his shoulder, and a light green brilliance rapidly spread from his shoulder to his entire body. Unfortunately, although the brilliance was fast, it was not as fast as the rhombus-shaped artifact. As soon as the light green brilliance reached Fan Qingmu's shoulder, the artifact's sharp point pierced his heart. In an instant, the brilliance from his heart shone brightly. It seemed to be Fan Qingmu's protective defense. Unfortunately, this defense was still no match for the strong poison of the magic item. It was quickly corroded and flaws appeared. -8. Chapter 1729. Fan Qingmu only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before a pitch-black qi emerged from his heart and rapidly spread to every part of his body. Following the emergence of this black qi, pieces of rotten flesh accompanied by a nauseating smell fell from Fan Qingmu's body. Fan Qingmu's corpse was still in a standing posture. When the pieces of flesh fell to the ground in a very strange manner, it did not take long for the pale white bones to be revealed. Highly toxic. Xiao Hua in the distance immediately narrowed his eyes and thought with a chill in his heart. He then looked at the door of the hall. Fan Qingmu is dead. His oppressive aura immediately disappeared. The group of Blue Li sect disciples immediately became lively. Their faces were filled with surprise. Many of them shouted, "Manor Master Hu, quickly open the array." In the hall, the only remaining disciple of Ling Pei Mountain Villa quietly put away the triangular flag. He stood up coldly and looked at the door of the hall. He was about to speak. At this moment, there was a schwa sound and the door of the hall opened. A black object was thrown in and landed on the table with a muffled dang. In the hall, the disciples were all cultivators. How could they not understand? That black object was none other than the head of Ling Pei Mountain Villa's Manor Master Hu. Manor Master Hu? Many disciples cried out in alarm. Their faces were filled with fear. Unlike the other disciples, the Ling Pei Mountain Villa's disciple had a cruel smile on his face. However, when he heard the voice outside the hall, an extremely shocked expression appeared on his face. Hee, let me see how much effort Hu Ming has put in the past 10 years and how many disciples of the Lanli sect he has won over. A sharp voice sounded. Although it sounded like a man's voice, there was a hint of femininity in the voice. Senior Uncle Ian. The voice was obviously very special. The disciples could immediately recognize it, even when they were frightened. Following the shouts of the disciples, a dozen or so cultivators slowly walked in from the entrance of the hall. The one in front was an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. He wasn't very tall, but his body was short and his face was thin. However, his pale face was very strange. He didn't look like a normal cultivator who was full of vitality. Behind Martial Uncle Ian, there were a dozen or so disciples in the 11th layer of Qi refining. However, apart from the few in front who were acting normally, the rest of the disciples looked dispirited. They were obviously injured. Moreover, judging by their dejected expressions, they should be the disciples of Master Hu of Lingpei Mountain Village. As expected, the disciple who had just stood up had a look of surprise on his face. He placed his hand in his bosom and stood there quietly, looking at Martial Uncle Ian. Martial Uncle Ian walked to the top of the hall and swept his gaze across the hall. After his gaze swept past the faces of Xiao Hua and the others, it stopped at a few disciples among the crowd. You all are really bold. You all know that I have a grudge with Hu Ming, yet you dared to hide it from me and join him. As soon as Martial Uncle Ian spoke, the disciples with pale faces and trembling bodies quickly stepped forward. With a plop, they knelt on the ground and shouted, Martial Uncle Ian, we didn't join Hu Ming. It was Hu Ming who said that there was a treasure today and invited us to come and try it out. We have absolutely no intention of betraying Martial Uncle Ian. Martial Uncle Ian sneered and said, Humph, if it was so simple, would I have scolded you all? If you all only had such selfish motives, why didn't you inform me? Why didn't you inform my direct disciple? Senior Uncle Ian sneered. A disciple boldly said, reporting to Martial Uncle, Hu Ming only said to keep it a secret. He didn't want us to tell anyone else. Senior Uncle Yin's expression didn't change. He waved his hand, and a beam of light shot out. It seemed to be an enchanted item, but it also seemed to be a yellow talisman. The disciple sensed it, and his body twitched as if he wanted to resist. But Senior Uncle Yin's pressure completely suppressed him, making it impossible for him to move. A dark green light flashed, and a miserable scream rang out. The disciple's body also began to turn black, and pieces of rotting flesh began to fall from his body. The other disciples immediately shouted, Martial Uncle, please spare us. Humph, you think you're the only one who knows? Since there are so many disciples gathered in the hall, how could you be the only one who knows? Martial Uncle Ian sneered at the skeleton that gradually appeared. Then he looked at the disciples who were kneeling on the ground with blood on their foreheads and said, Since you knew, why did you do it in the first place? Back then, if any of you knew, you could have just sent me a message. Martial Uncle, please spare us. The disciples immediately turned pale with fright. Knowing that there was no hope, they unconsciously began to resist. Go, kill them. Martial Uncle Ian waved his hand and ordered. At the same time, the pressure of the Foundation establishment stage pressed down. Yes, we understand. Several disciples behind Senior Uncle Ian replied. Then, they clapped their hands and took out several yellow talismans. What about Qingyu? What about the other disciples? Master, please give us your orders. When a few disciples walked a few steps forward, the fireball talismans in their hands shot out and landed on the bodies of those disciples. Several heart-wrenching screams sounded in everyone's ears, causing everyone's hearts to tremble in fear. A skinny disciple beside Martial Uncle Ian asked in a low voice. In an instant, everyone pricked up their ears and looked at Martial Uncle Ian with pitiful eyes. The other disciples? Martial Uncle Ian glanced at them coldly and said in a sharp voice, They didn't swear a blood oath to be loyal to me. We'll make a blood oath right now. All the disciples shouted when they heard this. It seemed like they had found an opportunity to live. Qingyu? There's no need for him to live. Martial Uncle Ian looked at the disciple who had been standing in front of the table and sneered. How can I not know what he's thinking? With that, Martial Uncle Ian raised his hand and flicked his middle finger. Seeing a green dot of light shoot out from Martial Uncle Yin's hand, Qingyu's expression changed greatly. He didn't dare to hesitate and immediately took out the scarlet triangular flag from before. Martial Uncle Ian was stunned when he saw the flag. An indescribable expression flashed through his eyes, and his finger that was about to shoot out a second light unconsciously paused. Qingyu took out the small flag and didn't stop. He activated his magic power, and a few strands of black light shot out from the small flag, shooting straight towards the walls of the hall. Uncle Yin's eyes were filled with interest as he watched the strands of black light land on the walls of the hall. He didn't raise his hand to stop them. As the black light landed on the walls of the hall, the black light flashed from the walls. As the light flickered, the restrictions in the hall weakened. Strands of black gas gradually squeezed out from the restrictions and quickly spread to cover the entire hall. Quick now! In the distance, Xiao Hua shouted and slapped his hand. A strand of Samadhi True Fire appeared in his hand. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the Samadhi True Fire appeared in his hand. With a palm strike, he slapped the nearest wall. The restriction on the wall had already been diluted by the black gas. After being burned by the Samadhi true fire, a small hole had already appeared in the restriction. At this moment, the restrictions on the four walls were replaced by the old ones. Xiao Hua's plan was indeed effective. Go! At this time, Qin Diheng also shouted. With a wave of his hand, his halberd immediately flew into the air. A tricolored brilliance emerged from the tip of the halberd, turning into 3 balls of light the size of a duck egg. They rushed towards the place where the Samadhi true fire was burning. Rumble. With 3 loud explosions, a hole the size of a person was blasted out of the restriction on the wall. I'll go first. Qian Diheng urged his spiritual power and didn't dare to hesitate. He flew towards the human-sized hole. Ming Hao was the first to fly out. Although Xiao Hua was the closest to the wall, he didn't move. He just stared at Qing Yu while his heart churned endlessly. Although he hadn't seen this scarlet triangular flag before, he wasn't unfamiliar with the black cheese restriction. It was very similar to the demonic formation he'd seen on the Thousand Zhang Peak. Moreover, he could also see the difference within the churning black qi. This was clearly demonic qi. Demonic cultivator. Xiao Hua immediately judged it. However, looking at Qing Yu, he didn't seem to be possessed by the blood shadow. He was no different from an ordinary human cultivator. Suddenly, Xiao Hua frowned and thought of what Xiao Xinrui said that day. Heavenly Demon Sect? Is this disciple the Heavenly Demon Sect that senior sister mentioned? At the same time, Xiao Hua also diverted some attention to look at Martial Uncle Lin. The cloud-suppressing seal in his body was ready to attack at any time. However, Martial Uncle Lin didn't seem to see what Xiao Hua and the others were doing. He only looked at Qing Yu, as if Qing Yu, a disciple of Lingpei Mountain Villa at the 12th level of Qi refining, was more important than Xiao Hua and the other 4 disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Watch me. Seeing that after Qian Diheng had escaped, the black qi on the wall had become denser and denser, gradually covering up the hole, Kuan Fian coldly shouted. The thunder-trapping bead in his hand also left his hand. Before the thunder-trapping bead flew to the wall, it had already enlarged to the size of a bowl. Countless tiny lightning bolts were released from the thunder-trapping bead, striking the black qi with a crackling sound. That lightning glow was indeed the nemesis of the black qi. Countless black qi was annihilated by the lightning glow. Instantly, another hole that was twice the size of the previous one appeared. I'm going, Kuan Fian said coquettishly and flew into the hole. Ouch! At this moment, Qing Yu's attention was diverted from Martial Uncle Lin. Seeing that 2 of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples had already escaped, he became anxious and spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the small triangular flag. The small triangular flag flashed with black light, and even more black light with traces of blood flew out from the flag. It repeatedly shot into the 4 walls of the hall. Thus, even more dense black qi crazily surged out from the walls. In the blink of an eye, the hole that Kuan Fian had escaped from was filled up. -8. Chapter 1730. Go. The remaining Sun Shu's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Xiao Hua, and the thunder lock in his hand flew into the air like Kuan Fian's thunder-trapping bead. Dozens of tiny lightning bolts also shot towards the hole. With the same crackling sounds, the thick black smoke was hit by the lightning bolts, and the hole appeared again, once again expanding to the size of a person. I'll go first? Sun Shu's voice was clearly different from the previous 2. It seemed to carry a questioning tone, and he looked at Xiao Hua with concern. When Xiao Hua nodded, Sun Shu's figure flew into the air, about to enter the hole. Unfortunately, at this moment, a low voice rang out, "Useless things. 2 of you have already escaped." As the voice spoke, a human figure appeared at the entrance of the hall. This person wore an ordinary Taoist robe and held a small triangular flag in his hand. However, this flag was twice as big as Qing Yu's. Moreover, the scarlet color was even deeper, as if it had been smeared with a thick layer of blood. Go. That person waved the small flag in his hand, and a few rays of black and red light shot towards the wall. Those rays of light were like water droplets that were thrown into a pot of oil. With a series of crackling sounds, more black gas gushed out from the wall at an extremely fast speed, firmly blocking the hole that Sun Shu had just created. This is bad. He thought to himself, this is bad. He slapped his forehead, wanting to take out the cloud-suppressing seal. However, just as he raised his hand into the air, his heart skipped a beat, and he immediately stopped. He turned his head to look at Sun Shu's thunder lock and saw that it couldn't break through the black smoke. He then looked at Martial Uncle Yin and the person who came later, Chang Huan. Xiao Hua recognized that person's face. His eyes unconsciously narrowed, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. This senior martial brother Chang was actually the Chang Huan that Xiao Hua had met in 100 Herb Gate when he was still an apprentice disciple of Shang Huaming. Thus, Xiao Hua felt even more certain that he had made the right choice. This guy, how could he also have this kind of flag? And it looks even more powerful than Qing Yu's flag. This guy, isn't he a loose cultivator? Could it be that he also joined some heavenly demon sect? Xiao Hua thought to himself. He turned around to look at Sun Shu, who had landed beside him, and nodded slightly. And Sun Shu was vexed in his heart, but when he saw Xiao Hua's calm gaze, his heart relaxed for no reason. That's right, this junior brother of his still hasn't taken out his most powerful cloud-suppressing seal. What is there to be afraid of? Moreover, the martial Uncle Yin who came first and the cultivator who came later were obviously not from the same group. If the sandpiper and the clam fought, the fisherman would benefit from it. Xiao Hua and I definitely have a chance. Therefore, Sun Shu placed the lightning lock on top of her head. A misty brilliance sprinkled down from the lightning lock, protecting her and Xiao Hua. When Chang Huan saw that Sun Shu was blocked, he no longer paid attention to him. His gaze swept past Xiao Hua, as if he didn't recognize him at all. He turned his head to look at martial Uncle Yin. Yin Ming, why did you come to Ling Pei Mountain Villa instead of staying in Limo Ridge? Then, he looked at the black head of Hu Ming on the table and laughed. So you are after the foundation of Pei Mountain Villa? What a coincidence. It's actually the same as my heavenly demon sect's plan. Ha ha ha, Yin Ming raised his head and laughed loudly. This old man has long heard of the heavenly demon sect's reputation, but I didn't expect to meet it today. However, your heavenly demon sect really disappoints this old man. Your disciple's cultivation isn't very high, but your tone isn't small. You, a junior in the 12th layer of Qi refining, actually dares to criticize this old man, a foundation establishment cultivator? Could it be this old man can't kill you? It's no wonder. You seem to be that extremely notorious loose cultivator, Chang Huan. Yin Ming looked as if he suddenly realized something and sneered. Before, you were just a minor character in the 9th layer of Qi refining. Now that you have cultivated to the late stage of the 12th layer of Qi refining, you think you are amazing? You really don't know that there is always someone better than you. Alas, criticizing this old man in front of this old man, you are simply a jumping clown. Fine. I'll let you see the power of a foundation establishment cultivator. As soon as Yin Ming's voice fell, he didn't take out any magic tool. He only flicked his right hand, his 5 fingers like playing a pipa, drawing a few afterimages in the air. In an instant, more than 10 sparks of fire, emitting a bewitching light, enveloped Chang Huan from top to bottom. Ha ha ha, you are just a foundation establishment cultivator. What is there to be proud of? Although Chang Huan's mouth spoke arrogantly, he didn't dare to be negligent. He waved the triangular formation flag, and a thick blood-black fog gushed out from the roof above his head, blocking the 10 sparks of fire. Pa 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 pa, more than 10 consecutive sounds rang out. The sound was very dull, and the originally thick blood fog was instantly blown apart. However, even though the blood fog was stretched out very long and was blown away by the explosions, there wasn't a single spark of blood fog. Haha, a foundation establishment cultivator is only a... Chang Huan's originally somewhat apprehensive mood immediately became excited, and his eyes flashed with a greedy light. His gaze was on the storage pouch at Yin Ming's waist. Should I go up and help? In the distance, Xiao Hua saw Chang Huan's gaze and felt annoyed. He couldn't help but think. As he thought this, he turned his head to look at Sun Shu. At this time, Sun Shu was very calm and narrowed his eyes. Feeling Xiao Hua's gaze, Sun Shu glanced at Xiao Hua and whispered, "These 2 cultivators aren't anything good. No matter who wins, both of our lives won't be guaranteed. Let's wait for both of them to be injured, then you and I will attack together. As senior sister says. Xiao Hua nodded. Looking again, Yin Meng's face also revealed shock. He clapped his hand, and a 3-inch-long rhombus-shaped magic tool like a flying sword floated in his palm. It was precisely the magic tool he used to kill Fan Qingmu just now, the Jade Rise shuttle. Humph. How can you measure the divine abilities of a Foundation establishment cultivator? A trace of a smile appeared on Yin Meng's face. Under the urging of his magic power, the Jade Rise shuttle suddenly expanded, and the green at the tip became even more dazzling. In my heavenly demon sect's blood formation, even a Foundation establishment cultivator will be trampled under my feet, Chang Huan arrogantly said. Then he looked at Qing Yu and cursed. 2 Imperial Thunder Sect disciples have already escaped, yet you still want to let the other disciples go? Quickly, kill all of Yin Meng's disciples. Yes, disciple understands. Qing Yu's expression had already changed a few times as he stood there. He clearly understood the stakes involved. When he heard Chang Huan's instructions, a ferocious expression appeared on his face. He waved the small flag in his hand. Immediately, the blood fog that surged out from the walls split apart and aggressively charged towards the disciples beside Yin Meng. When Yin Meng's disciples saw this, they didn't dare to be negligent. Several of them clapped their hands, and several fireball talismans, ice talismans, and other talismans shot out in succession. Unexpectedly, these powerful yellow talismans had already entered the blood mist and immediately lost their power. If they weren't corroded by the blood mist and turned into talismans, then they would explode and be covered by the blood mist. They couldn't harm anyone at all. Quick! Magical artifacts. The disciples immediately came to their senses and cried out in alarm, each of them taking out their magical artifacts. However, they were only Qi condensation disciples, so how many of them had magic tools? Even more disciples panicked and took out defensive yellow talismans, such as Vajra talismans and Iron Cloak talismans, and hurriedly used them on themselves. -8. Chapter 1731. Who would have thought that the defensive light barriers that usually looked extremely sturdy, which couldn't even be broken by ordinary fireball talismans, would be so fragile in the face of the blood-black mist? As soon as the mist came into contact with the light barriers, it immediately emitted a faint zhi-zhi sound. The light barriers were corroded to form an extremely small flaw, and as the mist surged in, the flaw became even larger. In just a few blinks of an eye, the defensive light barriers of the numerous disciples were completely corroded, and the mist was about to corrode their bodies. So powerful! The numerous disciples were greatly shocked. The yellow talismans in their hands continuously shot out, thickening the defensive light barriers again and again, wanting to stop the mist corrosion. However, although there were many yellow talismans, they couldn't delay the mist's corrosion in the slightest. The brilliance of the numerous disciples flickered. In the end, when the yellow talismans were used up, it was time for them to die. Meanwhile, Yin Meng summoned the Jade Hive shuttle, and a trace of coldness flashed through his eyes. He formed a seal with his hand and pointed his finger. Go! The Jade Hive shuttle drew a faint arc in the air and pierced towards Chang Huan. Chang Huan didn't panic, nor did he take out a magic tool. He only shook the formation flag in his hand again, and the already thin mist from before thickened again, once again blocking the Jade Hive shuttle. This is a bit troublesome. Xiao Hua watched from afar, his brows tightly knitted. When he first saw Chang Huan had just reached the 9th layer of the Qi refinement realm. In these past few years, Chang Huan had actually advanced to the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm. It was very obvious that his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds after he joined the Heavenly Demon Sect. The Heavenly Demon Sect was clearly a devil cultivator. Xiao Hua had never heard of it before, so it was very likely that it had only appeared in recent years. If it hadn't just been established, then it had always been secretly developing. Looking at Chang Huan's technique again, aside from using formation flags and borrowing the power of the Hall's formation to attack Yin Meng, he didn't reveal any devil cultivator techniques. Moreover, just this devil formation alone could trap a Foundation establishment cultivator, which truly shocked Xiaohua. Just as Xiaohua was pondering, the Jade Hive shuttle had already rushed into the mist. At the very beginning, Xiaohua could still see the Jade Hive shuttle flickering with blue light and the mist churning like boiling water. However, in a few breaths of time, everything became tranquil again, and the Jade Hive had already condensed into the mist. Yin Ming turned pale with fright. She conjured a Dharma seal and hurriedly tried to retrieve the Jade Tower shuttle. However, when the Dharma seal struck the fog, it was like a stone falling into water. She could only feel the Dharma artifact's response, but she was unable to retrieve it. Go, Chang Huan sneered. This time, he no longer waved the flag. Instead, he chanted and his hands began to form seals. As the seals formed, Chang Huan's face gradually turned black and his eyes became bloodshot. When the seals formed, Chang Huan shouted and hit the fog in front of him. Dozens of black gas condensed into the shape of sharp swords and flew toward Yin Ming. As the black gas flew, there was a faint ghostly howl. Not good. Seeing this, Yin Ming's expression also changed. She hurriedly clapped her hands, and a ring-shaped ball flew into the air. It seemed to be a defensive artifact. The defensive green brilliance poured down from the top of her head, protecting Yin Ming's body. Chang Huan saw that the black gas condensed into black swords were about to pierce Yin Ming's body. How could he let Yin Ming cast the spell successfully? A ruthless look flashed in his eyes. He opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of blood essence into the black gas in front of him. The black gas rapidly surged a few times, and the dozens of black gas moved twice as fast as before. Go! Yin Ming loosened his hand. Like the previous aura refining disciples, he shot out many defensive yellow talismans. Yin Ming's yellow talismans were naturally high level. Although the ice and other brilliances they produced couldn't last long in front of the black gas, they could still block the black gas for a moment. Just this moment alone, the brilliance of the ring-shaped artifact could protect Yin Ming. Unfortunately, just as a hint of joy flashed in Yin Ming's eyes, the two black gas between his two sides suddenly became thicker. There were several faint bloodshot threads swimming in it. In the blink of an eye, the black gas pierced through the defensive brilliance that had just been produced and pierced into Yin Ming's Taoist robe. You. A resentful voice appeared in Yin Ming's eyes. It was only now that he realized that Chang Huan's blood essence had only stimulated these two black gas. The other streams were just a cover. The black gas was also very powerful. As soon as it pierced into Yin Ming's body, it immediately turned into black threads like swimming snakes. They followed Yin Ming's blood vessels and spread towards his vital points. Moreover, wherever the black threads passed, his skin would turn pitch black. Yin Ming clenched his teeth. Without making any hand seals, he waved his hand and took out a jade bottle from his storage pouch. He crushed the jade bottle and swallowed the medicinal pill inside without even looking at it. At the same time Yin Ming swallowed the medicinal pill, the dozens of black gas that had been blocked by the defensive yellow talismans also pierced his body. In an instant, Yin Ming's entire body was shrouded in black gas. With a thump, Yin Ming's body unexpectedly fell to the ground, no longer moving. A foundation-building cultivator was killed just like that? Xiaohua looked on with a dumbfounded expression. Chang Huan also seemed to not dare to believe it. However, Chang Huan immediately laughed. A foundation-building cultivator is nothing more than this. As he spoke, he coldly looked at the Lanli sect disciples who were struggling in the black gas. His gaze fell on Xiaohua and Sun Shu. When he saw Xiaohua, he was slightly taken aback, but he immediately ignored him and said to Sun Shu with a smile, "The disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect are indeed worthy of their reputation. This poor Taoist was only a moment late and 2 people escaped. However, fortunately, fellow Sun is not among them. Otherwise, wouldn't I's arrangements be in vain?" Me? Sun Shu looked at Chang Huan in a daze and asked curiously, "This poor Taoist has never had any dealings with the Heavenly Devil sect, nor do I know any devil cultivators. May I know why fellow Taoist Chang is making such a big fuss?" Hee, fellow Sun doesn't need to know about this. Chang Huan smiled and said, "When I capture fellow Sun and see that person, you will know for yourself." You're courting death. How could Sun Shu ask again? He pointed his finger. The lightning lock that had been protecting him and Xiao Hua just now emitted a gorgeous brilliance. A flash of lightning flashed and struck towards Chang Huan. Kacha, kacha, a few sounds. The lightning split the black gas in front of Chang Huan into several strands. However, after the lightning disappeared, the black gas gathered together again. It was just that the color was a little lighter. Haha, even a foundation establishment cultivator is not the opponent of this blood array. You, a chi refining cultivator, can turn the sky upside down? Chang Huan laughed and waved the small flag in his hand again. A lot of black gas surged out from the four walls of the hall. Not only did it protect Chang Huan, but it also drowned the entire hall. Although this devil chi isn't as powerful as the formation set up by the devil cultivator on the Thousand Zhang Peak, I'm afraid ordinary chi refining cultivators are also powerless against it. Xiao Hua inwardly thought. Even Li Zongbao, who is at the great circle of chi refining, can't break it. It seems that I can only use the cloud-suppressing seal or the devil spear tip. Moreover, this Chang Huan, he had a grudge with this young master before. Since we met today, how can I let him escape? Xiao Hua's current cultivation was close to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Although he was trapped in the blood array, because he had already seen an even more powerful blood array before, he did not have the slightest trace of panic in his heart. When he saw that Sun Shu's lightning lock attack was ineffective, he clapped his hand and the white dust flew out from the space. It flew into the air and sprinkled a layer of yellow light that covered him and Sun Shu. Then, he shouted, Chang Huan, do you know this young master? You. At this moment, Chang Huan was waving the small flag to attack the black gas. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, he glanced at Xiao Hua, narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, I don't care who you are. You're just a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Even if I've seen you before and have some grudges with you, I will absolutely not let you live. Don't try to worm your way into being friends with me. However, a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Remember this well. This young master's name is Xiao Hua. Don't go to the netherworld without knowing this young master's name. Xiao Hua sneered and said loudly, Xiao Hua. Chang Huan was slightly stunned, but then the appearance of the first layer of chi refinement from several years ago merged with the appearance of the 12th layer of chi refinement in front of him. Ah, it's you? Chang Huan was shocked. At this moment, the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth rose. He slapped his forehead, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew out from his mouth. This cloud-suppressing seal was, after all, a magical treasure. As soon as it flew out, its aura was terrifying. Streams of heaven and earth spirit chi were attracted by the cloud-suppressing seal, and the bronze brilliance pushed away the black gas around 10 feet around it, creating a large empty space. Ah, magic treasure? Chang Huan was shocked and at the same time, his eyes flashed with greed. His somewhat red eyes swept over Xiao Hua and said with a smile, I didn't expect you to enter the Imperial Thunder Sect and be able to obtain this magic treasure. What a pity, you didn't die in my hands last time. Today, you still can't escape the fate of that day. Then, he waved the small flag left and right. Clouds like black lotuses formed around the small flag. Under the urging of Chang Huan's magic power, they surged towards the cloud-suppressing seal. This young master wants to see who will take whose life. Xiao Hua sneered. He urged the magic power in his hand and poured it into the cloud-suppressing seal. Under Xiao Hua's urging, the cloud-suppressing seal had already become 3 feet in size. Then, it slowly flipped over. The red and yellow brilliance at the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal was aimed at Chang Huan. Go. Xiao Hua pointed his finger. The cloud-suppressing seal emitted a deafening buzzing sound and smashed towards Chang Huan. Ah? The boundless power of karma appeared on the cloud-suppressing seal, making Chang Huan feel like he couldn't dodge or even do anything. After all, when Chang Huan was a rogue cultivator, he did countless outrageous things and had a lot of karma on him. This kind of karma was his nemesis. What kind of magic treasure is this? In his panic, Chang Huan waved the small flag again and again. In the end, He opened his mouth again without hesitation and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood essence onto the small flag. Instantly, tins of small black lotuses with faint red threads on all sides flew out from where the small flag was waved and circled below the cloud-suppressing seal, wanting to hold it up. -8. Chapter 1732. Below the cloud-suppressing seal, there were dozens of small black lotuses spiraling around, trying their best to stop the cloud-suppressing seal. However, the cloud-suppressing seal was still descending at a seemingly slow speed. Under the pressure of the magic treasure, the numerous black lotuses were shattered one by one, dissipating into wisps of black gas and then disappearing. Run, seeing that the small flag couldn't stop the cloud-suppressing seal's descent, and that the cloud-suppressing seal had locked onto him, Chang Huan immediately made a decision. He clenched his teeth and tried his best to suppress the fear in his heart. He waved the small flag in his hand again. While the black gas was surrounding him, dozens of flying swords condensed from the black gas stabbed towards Xiao Hua and Sun Shu just like before. "Senior Sister Sun, be careful," Xiao Hua shouted loudly. The black dust above his head shone brightly, thickening the light barrier a bit. Sun Shu did the same. Several bolts of lightning flashed from the thunder lock, scattering to her left and right, blocking the black gas outside. "Go!" Xiao Hua waved his hand. The black iron needles had already flown out while the black gas was churning. While dodging the black gas, they pierced towards Chang Huan through the gaps. Chang Huan's hands struggled to form a strange seal. A layer of black gas entrenched under his feet, lifting him up and flying towards the entrance of the hall. "Still want to run?" Xiao Hua sneered. His figure flew up and quickly chased after him. At the same time, the cloud-suppressing seal swayed slightly, chasing after him as it descended. As a magic treasure, the cloud-suppressing seal's power was incomparable. However, it also had a shortcoming, and that was that it consumed a lot of magic power. Moreover, when controlling it, it was like a young man wielding a weapon that didn't match his strength. His movements were very slow. Although Xiao Hua saw Chang Huan escape, the cloud-suppressing seal couldn't completely descend. Fortunately, although Chang Huan released a lot of black qi, which were like sharp swords, they were all suppressed and dissipated under the might of the cloud-suppressing seal. Not many of the flying sword-like black qi were able to reach Xiao Hua. Even the black qi in the hall was completely washed away when Xiao Hua flew up. "Io, this black gas can actually restrict divine sense." Xiao Hua's vision was blocked by the black gas. He unconsciously released his divine sense and shockingly discovered something strange. "Oh no, this black iron needle doesn't seem to be of much use." Just as he discovered that his spiritual sense was blocked by the black qi, Xiao Hua discovered that the black iron needles he secretly released also seemed to have sunk into sticky water within the black qi. Their flight was greatly restricted, and they were far from being able to display their unfathomable speed. "I'm afraid we'll have to use a magic weapon." Xiao Hua watched as Chang Huan was shrouded in black qi and moved towards the wall of the hall. He couldn't help but think to himself, "Humph, this Chang Huan is actually harder to deal with than a foundation establishment cultivator with the help of the blood formation. This is the only way." Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of sternness. His figure suddenly sped up as he shouted, "Where are you going? Have a taste of my needle." Then, he used his divine telekinesis to activate the black iron needle and pierced it towards the black qi surrounding Chang Huan. "Hee, you dare to use this thing to embarrass yourself?" It seemed that Chang Huan was already close to the wall. Although the cloud-suppressing seal had fallen, he was still confident that he could escape in this short period of time. Only then did he seriously tremble in his heart and encourage himself. Sure enough, Xiao Hua felt that when his black iron needle pierced into the black qi, it was like piercing into an extremely elastic silk. It couldn't penetrate even half an inch further. However, at this moment, his figure had already closed in on Chang Huan. He was only a few feet away. "Haha, then have another taste of my fist?" As Xiao Hua spoke, he once again raised his right hand and punched. Chang Huan was very puzzled. He didn't understand why Xiao Hua didn't use more strength to activate the cloud-suppressing seal and instead used his fist to attack. Although he knew that the black qi surrounding his body was extremely poisonous, he still activated even more black qi to block in front of Xiao Hua's fist. Seeing that Xiao Hua's fist was about to touch the black qi, Chang Huan's eyes also lit up. He eagerly wanted to see Xiao Hua's arm being corroded by the black qi. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly twisted. His left hand streaked across the air, leaving behind an afterimage. A pitch-black stick appeared from his left hand and directly pierced into the black qi surrounding Chang Huan's back. A heart-wrenching scream sounded. Black blood splashed into the black qi as Xiao Hua retracted his hand. With a sizzling sound, the black blood immediately boiled and disappeared without a trace. The demonic spear in Xiao Hua's hand actually ignored the corrosion of the black qi, ignored Chang Huan's defense, and directly pierced into his heart. Demonic weapon. Chang Huan's dead fish-like eyes flashed with an inconceivable expression as he muttered. At the same time, the black qi quickly seeped into Chang Huan's body as the demonic spear was pulled out. An incomparably fishy smell quickly spread out from Chang Huan's body. Pieces of rotten flesh also began to fall. Humph! Xiao Hua let out a cold snort from his nose. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal that had already landed on top of Chang Huan's head slightly tilted. It didn't stop and continued to fly forward. In front of the cloud-suppressing seal was a wall of the hall. With a loud pong sound, the entire hall seemed to shake. On the wall that was surging with black qi, a gap was smashed open by the cloud-suppressing seal. The black brilliance in this gap was annihilated, creating a hole the size of a person. The black qi around this hole rolled and slowly healed. Senior Sun, quickly leave. Xiao Hua didn't even turn his head. He grabbed with his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal once again flew out from the wall, preparing for a second impact. Sun Shu was originally behind Xiao Hua. Seeing this scene, her heart was happy. She looked deeply at Xiao Hua with her beautiful eyes and said, "Junior brother, be careful." Afterwards, without saying anything else, the Lei Suo flew in front of her. She herself used the flight technique to follow behind the Lei Suo and escaped from the gradually shrinking hole. Just as Sun Shu's figure disappeared, the hole had already healed. Go. Xiao Hua's expression didn't change. While urging his Li, the cloud-suppressing seal once again shot out. It was still at the place where the hole was just now. Useless thing. An extremely magnetic voice suddenly resounded through the entire hall. At the same time, a tall cultivator appeared from the black qi in the hall. This cultivator's cultivation was at the middle foundation establishment stage. He didn't wear any camouflage robes and didn't hide his cultivation. On his incomparably handsome face, a pair of eye-catching eyes flashed with an indescribable divine light. He was looking at Xiao Hua, who was casting his technique with astonishment. This person was the heavenly demon sect's Zhang Qingxiao. As soon as Zhang Qingxiao appeared, he immediately grabbed with his hand. The small black flag in Chang Huan's hand suddenly flew into his hand. Following Zhang Qingxiao's wave of the formation flag, a black, water-like liquid seeped into the wall. A middle foundation establishment stage cultivator. Seeing this, Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. The Li in his body urged. The cloud-suppressing seal hummed and smashed into the black qi in the wall even more quickly and violently. -8. Chapter 1733. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal smash into the wall of the hall and disperse the black qi, Xiao Hua's heart fell to the bottom of the valley and became ice-cold. Under the black qi, the liquid that looked like black water had already covered the entire wall. The black brilliance that had been destroyed by the cloud-suppressing seal flashed again and again. Although it had dimmed a lot, it was not extinguished. Xiao Hua's most powerful magic treasure, the cloud-suppressing seal, couldn't break Zhang Qingxiao's blood array. Seeing that the suppressing cloud seal's attack was ineffective, Xiao Hua hurriedly grabbed with his hand. The suppressing cloud seal flipped a few times in the air and flew to the top of Xiao Hua's head. A cluster of ancient bronze brilliance with red threads firmly protected Xiao Hua. Zhang Qingxiao held the array flag in his hand and looked at Xiao Hua with interest. He didn't have any intention of attacking. After the cloud-suppressing seal protected his body, Xiaohua was relieved. He looked at the unfamiliar cultivator in front of him and bowed. Junior is Xiaohua of the Imperial Thunder Sect. How should I address Senior? I know you're called Xiaohua, Zhang Qingxiao said with a smile. It was hard to say whether it was a sneer or a smile. Oh, Senior knows Junior? Xiaohua was surprised. Zhang Qingxiao nodded. I know you, but you don't know me. Zhang Qingxiao spoke the words you and me very smoothly, causing others to not feel that it was a senior speaking to a junior. It was precisely because of this that Xiaohua was greatly surprised, and he stared at Zhang Qingxiao for a long time before he shook his head and said, I'm sorry, Senior. Junior is still unable to recall. Zhang Qingxiao looked at the cautious Xiaohua and said, although you don't know this old man's name, you should know where this old man came from? Zhang Qingxiao obviously realized something was wrong and immediately changed his words. Is there a need to say? Senior must be a cultivator of the heavenly demon sect. Xiaohua's face was very calm. He looked at Zhang Qingxiao's eyes and said, Today is the first time Junior has seen a disciple of your sect. Junior came to Lingpei Mountain Villa today to participate in the Lingji meeting. I didn't think of fighting with your sect's disciples. Also, Junior doesn't want to participate in the grudge between your sect and Lingpei Mountain Villa. If Senior is willing, Junior can make a blood oath to not speak of this matter. What blood oath? In this world, only the dead can truly keep a secret. Zhang Qingxiao seemed to have thought of something and said coldly, Then Senior definitely won't let Junior leave this place alive today? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes as he calculated with all his might. Perhaps. Zhang Qingxiao lazily stretched her waist, and the small flag in her hand swayed slightly. Suddenly, a few blood-red brilliants separated from the small flag and flashed in the black gas. At the same time, in the black gas in the distance, a series of screams sounded. It was the disciples of the Lanli sect who were still struggling with all their might. I'm afraid I'll have to use that consumable magical artifact. Xiaohua's expression didn't change, but his hands were clenched into fists. But that magic tool can only be used in close quarters. If this guy dodges it, we'll be in trouble today. However, he immediately hesitated. This magic tool only said that it's useful for cultivators whose cultivation is one realm higher than mine. It didn't say anything about devil cultivators. I really don't know if it can be used. After a dozen screams, Zhang Qingxiao waved the small flag again. The four walls of the hall flashed with black light, and the black gas was absorbed by the walls like a whale swallowing water, revealing a clear hall. Of course, in the hall, other than the cultivator named Qingyu who was holding the small flag in fear, the rest of the cultivators were lying on the ground and gradually turned into black blood. Qingyu greets Sect Master. Qingyu walked in front of Zhang Qingxiao and bowed respectfully. What's going on? Zhang Qingxiao grabbed the small flag in Qingyu's hand and asked with a frown, Didn't you say that the Vice Sect Master has something to do? Why is it so messy? Why are there so many cultivators here? Vice Sect Master? Qingyu was stunned and said blankly, Disciple, doesn't know what Vice Sect Master has to do. This blood array is Senior Brother Chang's. After Qingyu finished speaking, Xiaohua, who was on guard in the distance, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turned out that Qingyu was a disciple of Lingpei Mountain Villa's Hu Ming. Although his cultivation was good, his status wasn't high. Thus, Qingyu joined the Heavenly Demon Sect by chance. The Heavenly Demon Sect gave Qingyu the position of Lingpei Mountain Villa's master. Today was the day Qingyu used Chang Huan's power to set up the blood array and kill Hu Ming and his subordinates. What about the dead Yin Ming? Zhang Qingxiao looked at Yin Ming's corpse and asked. Disciple doesn't know. Qingyu smiled bitterly. Disciple only knows that Yin Ming and Hu Ming have always been enemies. However, because they were both disciples of the Lanli sect, they didn't dare to offend each other. Who knew that Yin Ming would come to Lingpei Mountain Villa and kill Hu Ming? Then, he probed. Perhaps Yin Ming knew about the condensed treasure and was angry that his subordinates were roped in by Hu Ming. Condensed treasure? Zhang Qingxiao sneered. You guys are really whimsical. How can there be such a cheap thing in the world? Disciple doesn't dare. Disciple doesn't believe it. I just used this so-called condensed treasure to lure Hu Ming's subordinates. Qingyu immediately smiled. Zhang Qingxiao casually waved his hand and Fan Qingmu's storage bag flew into his hand. He then reached out and took Qingwu into his hand. Then, Zhang Qingxiao raised his left hand, and a few rays of black light flashed in his hand. The flesh on his left hand gradually disappeared, revealing eerie white bones. I also want to see what your so-called condensed knowledge treasure looks like. When the white bones were inserted into Qingwu, the entire Qingwu emitted a violent brilliance. It suddenly became big and small, as if it was about to explode. However, after Zhang Qingxiao spat out a mouthful of blood, Qingwu was actually wrapped in blood and no longer moved. With a sea-eyed sound, Zhang Qingxiao's left hand, which had turned into white bones, was inserted into Qingwu's mouth. At this moment, Zhang Qingxiao's slightly squinted eyes suddenly widened. He was confused, and then a divine light flashed in his eyes as if he had just woken up from a dream. However, it was only a flash. Then, his face changed and he quickly pulled his hand out of Qingwu. He waved the small flag in his hand, and a black qi came down from the top of his head and tightly wrapped around Qingwu. With a hong sound, the black qi exploded and scattered in all directions. Zhang Qingxiao's Taoist robe was lifted up by the qi wave. Qingwu, which contained the condensed treasure, was indeed destroyed by itself, as Fan Qingmu said. Damn it, I haven't even touched the condensed treasure and it exploded. Zhang Qingxiao couldn't help but curse. This condensed treasure really has no fate with me. This tone is very similar to second senior brothers? A thought flashed in Xiao Hua's mind. Who knows if this condensed treasure is real or not? Beside him, Qingyu smiled apologetically. Fan Qingmu probably just wanted to swindle some spirit stones. There's nothing left. What's the point of talking about it? Zhang Qingxiao glanced at everyone's corpses and looked at Xiao Hua. At this moment, Xiao Hua was also surprised. He couldn't understand why the heavenly demon sect's sect master didn't fight with him and instead went to deal with other things. In this period of time, Xiao Hua tried his best to recover his Fali. He had already recovered more than half of the Fali he used to control the suppressing cloud seal. Xiao Hua, this sect will ask you a few questions. If you can answer honestly, this sect can consider sparing your life under the condition that you make a blood oath. Zhang Qingxiao coldly looked at Xiao Hua. A few questions? Xiao Hua was stunned. Then, he shook his head and said, Junior is a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. I will never join the Heavenly Demon sect. Hee, who told you to join the Heavenly Demon sect? Zhang Qingxiao chuckled and said, if your answers satisfy this sect will let you go. Let you reunite with your senior martial brother and senior martial sister. At the mention of Sun Shu and the others, Xiao Hua's expression slightly changed. Needless to say, the person in front of him was a Foundation Establishment middle-stage cultivator. How could Sun Shu and the others escape from his hands? Presumably, they had already been captured outside, right? Xiao Hua took a deep breath and said, Senior, please ask. Junior doesn't know if I can answer. Make a blood oath first. All your answers will be true. Zhang Qingxiao said indifferently. Xiao Hua nodded. Junior will make a blood oath. Whatever Junior says will be true. And Zhang Qingxiao nodded and said to Qingyu, you can leave. Yes, this disciple will take his leave. Qingyu bowed and walked to the entrance of the hall. He waved the small flag and a slit flashed in the black qi. Qingyu walked out from the slit. Are you a descendant of the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples? Zhang Qingxiao asked. No. When did you join the Imperial Thunder Sect? Before joining the Imperial Thunder Sect, which family did you belong to? Junior joined the Imperial Thunder Sect 10 years ago. Xiao Hua hesitated and said, Junior was a loose cultivator before joining the Imperial Thunder Sect. Oh, then where did you come from? Xiao Hua's expression slightly changed and he shook his head. Forgive me for not being able to answer this. Why? Are you afraid that this sect will look for your family? Since Senior knows, why are you still asking? Xiao Hua also sneered. Even if this Junior dies here today, I will never bring disaster to my family. Humph. Zhang Qingxiao coldly snorted and suddenly asked, What was your cultivation level before joining the Imperial Thunder sect? 10th layer of Qi refining. Xiaohua answered without hesitation. What about the 5 years before joining the Imperial Thunder sect? Zhang Qingxiao pressed. This. Xiaohua's expression suddenly changed. He said, Senior, don't you think you're asking too much? Then, he realized something and said, could it be that Senior saw this junior at that time? Right now, this sect is the one asking you, not the other way around. Zhang Qingxiao sneered. Moreover, this sect has just asked. If you want to live, you'd better obediently answer. What if this junior doesn't want to answer? Xiaohua sneered and pointed his hand. The cloud-suppressing seal above his head immediately buzzed and its bronze brilliance flourished. Strands of spiritual energy were attracted to the cloud-suppressing seal, causing gusts of cold wind. Humph, it's nothing but a damaged magic treasure. In this old man's eyes, it's not worth mentioning. Zhang Qingxiao also snorted and waved the small flag in his hand. This old man only needs to activate the blood formation to shield the surrounding spiritual energy. How much magic power do you, a mere Qi refining cultivator, have in your body for a magic treasure to use? When Xiaohua heard this, his face immediately paled. -8. Chapter 1734. What Zhang Qingxiao said was extremely true. The cloud-suppressing seal was a magic treasure. Driving it required a lot of magic power, and the cloud-suppressing seal absorbed even more spiritual energy. This was also the foundation of magic treasures being more powerful than magic tools. If he really couldn't draw spiritual energy from the outside world inside this blood formation, Xiaohua could only use his own magic power to pour it into the cloud-suppressing seal. Otherwise, this cloud-suppressing seal could only be seen but not used. It was simply inferior to magic tools. Although Xiaohua's magic power wasn't as little as Zhang Qingxiao said, how long could it last? Fine, since you don't want to say more, this old man will ask you one last question. Zhang Qingxiao saw the change in Xiaohua's expression and said with a smile, Is your origin in the direction of Xiaoyu continent? For example, the east, south, west, and north of the country of Xi. Which place? Xiaohua looked at Zhang Qingxiao, at this extremely unfamiliar face. His mind was filled with thoughts, but he really couldn't remember where he had seen this heavenly demon sect's sect master. Hee, Senior. If Junior said he didn't know his origin, would you believe it? Xiaohua bit his lips, stared at Zhang Qingxiao's eyes, and said loudly. Zhang Qingxiao's eyes flashed with an indescribable expression. It seemed to be gratification, pity, and anger. Seeing the change in Zhang Qingxiao's expression, Xiaohua knew it wasn't good. He waved his hand and struck the cloud-suppressing seal. The magic power in his body flowed and poured into the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal hummed loudly, and a bronze brilliance flashed, gradually expanding. Sure enough, Zhang Qingxiao sneered. How can this sect believe this kind of lie? Let this sect see what the Imperial Thunder sect's disciple is capable of. As Zhang Qingxiao spoke, he clapped his hand. A golden light flew out from his storage bag and stopped above Zhang Qingxiao's head. It was his magic treasure, the bright scenic bell. As Zhang Qingxiao struck the bright scenic bell, a dazzling brilliance sprinkled down, like Xiaohua's cloud-suppressing seal, protecting Zhang Qingxiao. Huh, also a magic treasure? It's actually not a magic treasure. Xiaohua was slightly stunned. However, he didn't think too much about it. He pointed his hand, and the cloud-suppressing seal rumbled as it smashed towards Zhang Qingxiao. At the same time, Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He waved his hand, and his dust flew out to protect himself. Hee, I am quite surprised that a meditational-level kid can control a treasure. Zhang Qingxiao's face showed a trace of excitement. Although he held the array flag in his hand, he did not wave it. It seemed that he really wanted to see the power of the suppressing cloud seal. All right, I'll let you know the power of my Imperial Thunder sect. Xiaohua rejoiced in his heart. He did his best to urge the cloud-suppressing seal to smash it down at a speed that seemed slow but was actually fast. His eyes spun around as he looked around the hall, trying to find a flaw in the blood array. At this moment, The blood formation's black gas had already converged to the four walls of the hall. All the black gas was flowing within the walls, as if the four walls were a pool of black water with countless whirlpools inside. Xiao Hua looked around and saw that the walls were all the same, so he released a strand of his divine sense. Who would have thought that just as his divine sense came into contact with the black gas actually entangled his divine sense, as if it wanted to corrode his divine sense. Ouch! Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He hurriedly withdrew his divine sense and thought to himself, I didn't expect this blood array to be so miraculous. In the hands of this heavenly demon sect master, it's actually even more powerful than in Chang Huan's hands. Zhang Qingxiao seemed to know that Xiao Hua's divine sense was startled by the blood array, and the corner of his mouth actually revealed a trace of a smile. Buzz buzz. The cloud-suppressing seal finally flew in front of Zhang Qingxiao. Xiao Hua slightly raised his hand, and the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal gently tilted to the side, aiming at Zhang Qingxiao, who was under the bright scenic bell. Ouch! A burst of trembling that came from the bottom of his heart and seeped into his soul, causing Zhang Qingxiao's expression to instantly change. What kind of treasure is this? Why is it so strange? Zhang Qingxiao did not dare to be negligent. He waved the array flag in his hand, and a faint black gas descended from the sky, wrapping around his entire body. Using the power of the blood array, Zhang Qingxiao was able to block the negative karma coming from the cloud-suppressing seal. Rumble. With a loud sound, the cloud-suppressing seal had already smashed down, smashing right on top of the golden brilliance of the bright scenic bell. Like a large stone falling on a brocade, the brilliance of the bright scenic bell was extremely depressed. Oh! Zhang Qingxiao was surprised again. He did not expect Xiao Hua to actually have such magic power. He formed a seal with his left hand, and the bright scenic bell made a dang sound. The golden brilliance greatly flourished, and an enormous rebounding force was born from the brilliance. All of a sudden, the cloud-suppressing seal was bounced back. Hiss! Xiao Hua took a deep breath, secretly shocked in his heart. A middle foundation establishment cultivator is indeed formidable. This golden bell's magic treasure. I'm afraid the cloud-suppressing seal won't be able to block it. Moreover, this devil cultivator uses a magic treasure to protect his body, so I can't get close. I only have one chance to use that consumable magic treasure. Before I can break through this defense, I definitely cannot use it. Immediately, Xiao Hua slightly muttered to himself. He pointed his finger again, and magic power poured into the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal received Xiao Hua's magic power and once again fiercely rumbled. However, the cloud-suppressing seal increasingly shrunk, shrinking to the size of a foot. Go! Xiao Hua shouted loudly. Immediately after, he secretly released a trace of his Buddhist sense, probing towards his lower body. Rumble. Another sound rang out. This time, the sound was much quieter than before, but the power was much greater. An extremely large amount of the bright scenic bell's brilliance was washed away. Damn it, I actually underestimated you. The smile on Zhang Qingxiao's face was very brilliant. He formed another seal, and this time, the bright scenic bell also buzzed repeatedly. Unexpectedly, it swayed rapidly, and several rays of brilliance sprinkled down. Only then was the cloud-suppressing seal blocked. I'll let you see this sect's methods. Zhang Qingxiao stabilized the bright scenic bell, and the formation flag in his right hand waved. From above the hall, several rays of black energy pierced towards Xiao Hua like sharp swords. At this time, Xiao Hua's face was not alarmed, but instead happy. He laughed brightly. Then I'll let you see this young master's methods. Huh. Seeing Xiao Hua like this, Zhang Qingxiao was slightly stunned. He did not think that Xiao Hua, who had already taken out his magic treasure, would have some powerful methods. However, what happened next left him completely dumbfounded. Xiao Hua's figure swayed, and a mighty Vajra Dharma body of 2 feet tall was quickly born from his body. This Dharma body was golden all over. Although many parts of it were void, the edges of the figure's outline had gradually become clear, especially the front part of the 2 arms. The 2 fists and the wrists had already solidified. This is... Zhang Qingxiao's mouth was half open, and the formation flag in his hand was slightly tilted. He seemed to know what this was, but he couldn't remember it for a while. Just when Zhang Qingxiao was surprised, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly flew up and flew towards Zhang Qingxiao, completely ignoring the several rays of black energy. Pa-pa-pa series of sounds. The extremely powerful black energy that could even kill the Foundation Establishment Stage Yin Ming was actually scattered by the fist of the mighty Vajra Dharma body. -8. Chapter 1735. Xiao Hua stealthily released a trace of his Buddhist sense and was actually able to detect the true situation of the blood array. The black gas of the blood array had a corrosive effect on divine sense, but had no effect on Buddhist sense. Thus, Xiao Hua was overjoyed and used the magical ability of the mighty Vajra Dharma body. Sure enough, this Buddhist Dharma body was the nemesis of devil cultivators. Just now, the incomparably powerful black gas was actually scattered by the incomplete fist of the Vajra Dharma body. It simply couldn't get close to Xiao Hua. Zhang Qingxiao saw this situation that she had never encountered before and was even more shocked. She was stunned for a moment with her mouth wide open. It was also at this moment that Xiao Hua's figure swept across the space of the hall like lightning and arrived below Zhang Qingxiao and Xiao Jingming Bell. Although Zhang Qingxiao knew that Xiao Hua's flying talisman was extremely fast, she also didn't think that Xiao Hua's flying technique could be this fast. Almost without any movement, Xiao Hua very strangely took out a huge black object and without any explanation, continuously hit the defensive light barrier of the Jingming Bell. When Zhang Qingxiao saw the huge object in Xiao Hua's hand, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was a giant devil hammer. Pong pong pong, a series of sounds rang out. The giant devil hammer in Xiao Hua's hand was like paper. However, every time this paper-like object hit the light barrier of the Jingming Bell, the light barrier would violently shake. After a few times, the Jingming Bell actually let out a sorrowful cry, and the light it scattered gradually dimmed. Good, this guy actually has a devil tool. Zhang Qingxiao couldn't help but groan. She knew how strong Xiao Hua was, and now it seemed that Xiao Hua's strength was much greater than what she remembered. Xiao Hua saw that the giant devil hammer was effective and was overjoyed. After all, the cloud-suppressing seal needed magic power and heaven and earth spirit chi to move. But this giant devil hammer only needed strength. He lacked everything but strength. Go! Xiao Hua then waved the giant devil hammer and at the same time used his divine sense to move the cloud-suppressing seal, smashing it at the place where the giant devil hammer was ravaging. Rumble! A loud sound rang out. The incomparably tough defensive light barrier of the Jingming Bell finally broke under the attack of the cloud-suppressing seal and the giant devil hammer. This large hole rapidly expanded in all directions. Motherfucker, you're really amazing. Zhang Qingxiao could not help but exclaim in admiration. With a wave of her hand, the array flag was activated, and a fishnet-like black gas fell from the top of her head. Who? Just as she was waving the array flag, Zhang Qingxiao's expression suddenly changed. She shouted and turned her head to look in a certain direction. Xiao Hua, who was facing Zhang Qingxiao, was ecstatic when he saw Zhang Qingxiao's bright scenic bell being destroyed. He waved his sledgehammer and blocked in front of his body. He instantly used the awakening lightning escape and flew towards Zhang Qingxiao's chest. As he flew closer, the consumable magic tool was already stored in his mouth. Once he got close enough, he would use the giant demonic hammer's attack to shoot out the magic tool. In Xiao Hua's opinion, even if this magic tool couldn't kill the heavenly devil sect master whose name he didn't know, it could at least severely injure him. Relying on the giant devil hammer and the Dream Slayer flying sword, he might be able to break this blood formation. But just as Xiao Hua controlled the cloud-suppressing seal to fly above his head to block the black gas and was about to spit out the magic tool in his mouth, he heard Zhang Qingxiao's angry shout. Xiao Hua originally thought that this was Zhang Qingxiao's plan to lure the enemy, but his Buddhist sense naturally swept towards the direction Zhang Qingxiao was looking at. This sweep did not matter, but Xiao Hua's mind was greatly shaken. He saw countless black gas gushing out from the corpse that was previously lying on the ground. This black gas was extremely similar to the black gas of the blood formation, but it was even denser. This black gas quickly wrapped around the black gas, and a doubtful and cold voice sounded. This is the Buddhist sect's Dharma body? Motherfucker. Another heavenly devil sect disciple. This young master's life is in danger today. As this voice sounded, a powerful divine sense swept through the black gas, and a pressure comparable to the middle stage of Foundation establishment also came pressing down. Xiaohua could not help but secretly complain. He hesitated, not knowing whether to spit out the magic tool in his mouth. Who are you? Zhang Qingxiao sneered. The pressure that she had not released all this time was also released at this time, and in an instant, it blocked that pressure. The pressure of two middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivators collided with each other, causing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the hall to become chaotic. Even the black gas that was spilling down from the sky was scattered. Of course, the pressure that just pressed down on Xiaohua was also blocked by Zhang Qingxiao. Huh, these two people don't know each other? Xiaohua was stunned, and the magic tool in his mouth stopped. Soon after, Xiaohua's Buddhist sense swept out, and he saw the two people's pressure colliding with each other, causing the black gas of the blood formation to become chaotic. His eyes immediately lit up, and his figure suddenly turned, flying towards the place where the two people's pressure collided with each other at a speed several times faster than before. Zhang Qingxiao's eyes were fixed on the black gas above the hazy corpse, and she did not see Xiaohua's escape in the slightest. And inside the black gas, besides the words just now, there was also the pressure released. For a moment, there was no movement, but the black gas was rolling like boiling water. Bang, bang, bang. A series of more than 10 sounds rang out. This time, Xiaohua used all of his strength. He swung his arm, and the giant devil hammer was like a dozen or so afterimages, hitting the blood formation that was disturbed by the pressure just now. Then, with a rumbling sound, the cloud-suppressing seal finally flew over and hit the place where the giant devil hammer hit. Hua, several cracks suddenly appeared on the black gas that was like a water surface. Xiaohua laughed loudly and urged the mighty Vajra Dharma body, and a punch hit the location of the cracks. With a pung sound, a hole the size of a person was punched out. Xiaohua did not say anything. His figure leapt up, and he used the awakening lightning escape, drilling towards the hole. Where do you think you're going? A cold voice came from the rolling black gas. At the same time, a wisp of thick black gas separated from the mass of black gas and quickly shot towards Xiaohua. Damn it, of course, I am in charge of my blood formation. If I don't let him go, then I naturally won't let him go. Who made you worry? If you want to keep him, then I will let him go. Zhang Qingxiao sneered and shouted loudly. She waved the formation flag, and the hole in the blood formation became bigger. Moreover, several wisps of black gas also flew out and condensed into a cloud behind Xiaohua, blocking that wisp of black gas. With a muffled boom, that wisp of black gas pierced into the black cloud like a sharp thorn. The black cloud swelled, and then it was scattered by the black gas. Zhang Qingxiao's expression was even more strange, and she shouted, "You are not a disciple of the Blue Li sect. You which demonic cultivator are you?" Although that wisp of black gas passed through the black cloud, it was blocked by the black cloud. Moreover, Xiaohua's awakening lightning escape was so fast. When the black gas flew to the hole in the blood formation, Xiaohua's figure had already disappeared outside the hole. G, a strange sound came from the rolling black gas. How can you know who I am? You little demonic cultivator. Where did you get this demonic cultivation method? It's actually so pure. Which demonic cultivator are you? My heavenly demonic sect is the only demonic sect in the Dawn Rain continent. You are just a lonely ghost. Why don't you hurry up and seek refuge under my sect? How could Zhang Qingxiao answer him? With a wave of his hand, the formation flag repaired the blood formation. His other hand patted his forehead, and an inch-long flying sword flew out from his mouth. It was blood-red in color and floated in front of him. The only demonic sect in the Dawn Rain continent? Ha 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 ha. Following this loud and clear voice, a human figure twice the size of an ordinary cultivator slowly stood up from the black gas. When this person stood steadily, The boiling black gas from before had already gradually entered his body. The place where the black gas entered actually revealed a pitch-black demonic armor. This demonic armor faintly had some enchanting runes on it, and the gaps between the runes were faintly blood-red, as if it was smeared with fresh blood. That demonic armor covered most of this person's body, and the arms and shoulders that were exposed outside of the demonic armor were thick and bulky muscles. You are Ming? Zhang Qingxiao saw that his face had already turned green, but his previous appearance could still be vaguely seen, and she couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Is it important whether I am Ming or not? Ming said with a smile, and his voice was still sharp. I only know that you are a frog at the bottom of a well. You created a heavenly demonic sect in the country of Shi, and you claim to be #1 in the world. Ha ha ha, truly laughable. Originally, I wanted to look for the sect master of this heavenly demonic sect to discuss the development of our demonic cultivators, but now it seems that there is no need for that. Zhang Qingxiao's expression changed slightly. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Ming for a long time, then said coldly, "Then tell me, what other demonic sects are there in the Dawn Rain continent? Aren't Extreme sect, Coitus sect, and 6 Levels sect all famous demonic sects? Not to mention the other small sects that are not even worth mentioning." Ming said contemptuously with a faint smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. What? So many? Zhang Qingxiao was stunned, but then he thought of something, and his eyes widened as he said anxiously, "Fellow Taoist, could it be that, outside the Million Ming Mountains?" Hearing the hesitation and probing in Zhang Qingxiao's tone, Ming laughed loudly and said, "So fellow Taoist is not completely ignorant. This old man thought that you had the same origin as me, but unexpectedly. Ha ha ha, fellow Taoist was actually able to establish the heavenly demonic sect and do things that this old man and the others couldn't do. This old man really admires you." Wait. Zhang Qingxiao frowned slightly, then cupped his fists and said, "This sect master is Qing Fengmin. How should I address you?" "This sect master is naturally Ming." Ming smiled, then looked around and said, "Sect Master Qing, why haven't you put away this blood formation? Could it be?" As Ming spoke, the demonic armor on his body flashed with brilliance. "Hee, fellow Taoist, you're overthinking." Zhang Qingxiao pondered for a moment, then the formation flag in his hand swayed. Wisps of blood-black smoke rose from the walls of the hall and flew toward the formation flag. Zhang Qingxiao said, "This blood formation was set up by my vice sect master to avenge his past enmity. This sect master is just here to take a look, and I have no other intentions. I didn't expect to actually meet fellow Taoist here. This is the great fortune of my heavenly demonic sect." -8. Chapter 1736. Ever since I learned about the heavenly demon sect, I've been looking for an opportunity to contact Sect Master Qing. It's just a coincidence today. I didn't expect my wish to come true. It's my honor. Seeing Zhang Qingxiao put away the blood formation, Ming also recited a strange incantation. The demon realm slowly turned into wisps of black gas and was absorbed into Ming's body. At the same time, his figure also slowly shrank. When the black gas around him disappeared, a normal Ming appeared in front of Zhang Qingxiao. "May I know, which sect are you from?" Zhang Qingxiao thought for a moment and asked softly. "Haha, there's no need to rush. This old man is out on official business. Now that all of my disciples are dead, this old man has the time to discuss this matter with Sect Master Qing. We can talk about this later." Ming said with a smile. "Good." Zhang Qingxiao clapped and said, "That's exactly what I want to ask for." I don't dare. I also have something to ask of Sect Master Qing." Ming cupped his fists and said, "If Sect Master Qing can complete my task, you'll be the main contributor to my demon sect unifying the Dawn Rain continent." "Unifying the Dawn Rain continent?" Zhang Qingxiao frowned and asked curiously, "Millions of demon cultivators from Ming Mountains. Hee, that's why we're here." Ming only said one sentence and didn't say anything else. He just looked at the hole in the hall and said with a puzzled face, "Which sect's disciple is that cultivator who escaped just now? How can he be so powerful? I remember that everyone in this hall is Lonely Sect's disciple, and they're all at Chi refining stage. Not only can this disciple use magic treasures, but he also has the legendary Buddhist Dharma Body Divine ability. What Buddhist Dharma Body Divine ability? Zhang Qingxiao pretended to be surprised and said, could it be the Buddhist sect that's the nemesis of my demon sect? I'm not sure. Yin Meng said awkwardly, I was using my sect's secret technique just now, so I couldn't see or hear clearly. I only took a glance and can't be sure. If Sect Master Qing didn't get angry with me just now and let him stay, I could use the soul-searching technique to learn something. A cold light flashed on Zhang Qingxiao's face, and she sneered, are you blaming this sect? Ha ha ha, I wouldn't dare. Yin Meng waved his hands repeatedly. It's all this old man's fault. When this old man saw that there was actually a devil cultivator's blood array here, I had the idea of waiting for him to show up. If I had revealed my true form at that time, how could there have been such a misunderstanding between us? Then, Sect Master Qing won't let a disciple of the Buddhist sect escape so easily. It's no wonder. It's all my fault. Zhang Qingxiao changed her expression and said, this cultivator's mouth is very tight. He didn't reveal a single word. Moreover, the disciples in the hall are all dead. The disciples of Ling Pei Mountain Villa, they are all gone. I'm afraid it will be difficult to find the origin of this disciple. Forget it. The Buddhist sect has already been dead for tens of thousands of years. Even if a Tao sect disciple managed to obtain a little of it, he would not be able to accomplish much. Moreover, I'm afraid that the Tao sect wants to destroy the Buddhist sect even more than we do, right? Yin Meng laughed. Zhang Qingxiao rolled her eyes and shook her head. I don't know. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist. Haha, well said. Yin Meng looked at the hall's door that was already open and said with a smile, this old man will tell you everything he knows. Please. Zhang Qingxiao raised her hand and looked at the hole in the hall. There was a thoughtful look in her eyes. As for Xiao Hua, who had just escaped from the blood formation in the hall, he didn't dare to tarry in the slightest. Without even looking, he used the lightning escape to escape in a certain direction. However, two voices berated him at the same time. Where did this brat come from? Following that voice, a heavenly demon sect disciple under the starlight waved the long banner in his hand, and an incomparably fishy bloody light swept over. Next to this heavenly demon sect disciple, there was a slightly taller one. He held a thick black stick in his hand, and he was also swinging it down. As the stick was swung, there was actually a heart-wrenching howl of the dead. It was clearly refined from the souls of living people. Following the berating of these two people, many figures appeared in the distance. Xiao Hua swept with his Buddhist awareness but didn't find any trace of Sun Shu and the others. Therefore, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the giant devil hammer in his left hand that hadn't been put into the space smashed towards the stick in a thunderous manner. At the same time, he opened his mouth and a green and red brilliance flashed. The Dream Slayer flying sword flew out and flew towards the bloody light. When the two heavenly demon sect disciples saw this, they were not alarmed but happy. Their magic tools were refined from the souls and blood of living people. As long as ordinary magic tools were contaminated, they would immediately be corroded and lose their effectiveness. This cultivator didn't know what was good for him and used his magic tool like this. Wasn't it falling into their hands? Who would have thought that with a loud pong, the turbid substance on the stick didn't corrode the giant devil hammer? Instead, under the heavy blow of the giant devil hammer, it was smashed into two pieces. Not only that, but the giant devil hammer's remaining power was not exhausted. Not only did the head of the hammer smash into the disciple's body, but the other half of the stick also stabbed into his body. The other disciple was even more miserable. Just as he heard the loud sound, the Dream Slayer flying sword pierced through the bloody light. An indescribable fear rose from the bottom of his heart. Before he could scream, the Dream Slayer flying sword pierced through his throat and flew into the night sky. As the Dream Slayer flying sword flew past the disciple's corpse, Xiao Hua's figure was also holding the cloud-suppressing seal in his hand. Since he easily killed the two disciples, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and caught the long banner that fell from the sky. Afterwards, he urged his remaining magic power to use the awakening lightning escape with all his strength. Like an afterimage, he flashed under the starlight and disappeared. When the other heavenly demon sect disciples found him, how could they still see Xiao Hua's trace? The heavenly demon sect master is very strange. How could he let me escape? Although Xiao Hua escaped from Lingpei Mountain Manor, the fear and doubt in his heart didn't disappear at all. He still thought to himself, even if it was because of that Yin Ming's casual interference, he wouldn't have let me go so easily, right? Pei, what are you thinking about? Even if he didn't let me go, could it be that he could keep me here? Xiao Hua spat out. The heavenly demon sect's blood array was personally broken by me. Only, I didn't think that Yin Ming actually didn't die, and is also a devil cultivator. Granny, I even gave my life to that heavenly demon sect master, but in the end, I still don't know his name. AI, how can I be so unlucky? This Lingpei Mountain Manor's blood array clearly wasn't aimed at me, but at Sun Shu. How did I become the scapegoat? The sect leader of the heavenly demon sect. Will he issue a sect leader's order to arrest this young master? -8. Chapter 1737. Also, Yin Ming is a cultivator of the Blue Li sect. Will he reveal the fact that I know the Buddhist sect's cultivation method? Then, where should I go from here? Xiao Hua was very angry after thinking about it. Humph, if he dares to reveal it, I will tell him that he is a demonic cultivator. But what if he doesn't reveal it? Will I still reveal the secret of him being a demonic cultivator? Xiao Hua suddenly thought again. Unconsciously, Xiao Hua was a little hesitant. Yin Ming was a cultivator of the foundation establishment stage. His status was much higher than his. If he really revealed it, would they believe him or him? Forget it. Let's wait and see. Xiao Hua shook his head gloomily. At this time, he had already flown hundreds of miles away from Jiangqing City. Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to the direction of escape at all. The moonlight sprinkled on the grassland like water, and the cool wind blew. Countless light and darkness were reflected on the boundless ground. Xiao Hua's shadow was cast on the light and darkness, passing by like a wisp of smoke. It should be safe. Xiao Hua swept his Buddhist consciousness behind him with all his might, but he didn't find any signs of pursuit. Then, he carefully looked around him for a long time, but he didn't find any signs of spiritual sense. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. Senior Sister Sun and the others escaped before me. I don't know if they fell into the hands of the heavenly demon sect. Xiao Hua thought to himself, we are just disciples of the Qi refinement stage. We came out to gain experience. Even if we die for the sect, we won't care. It's just that this Lingpei Mountain Villa is involved with the heavenly demon sect. If I send a message back to the sect, they might come to rescue us. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua clapped his hand and took out a communication talisman. He thought to himself, let me see if Senior Sister and the others are captured first. The crimson communication talisman was sent out. It only paused in midair for a moment, and then flew quickly in a direction, and that direction wasn't where Lingpei Mountain Villa was. Haha, great. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He immediately flew in the direction where the communication talisman disappeared. In the time it took to finish a meal, 3 figures appeared in the air opposite him. A surprised voice sounded. Is it Junior Brother Xiao? Haha, Senior Sister Sun. You guys really escaped. Xiao Hua laughed loudly and shouted, You also escaped. Sun Shu's voice was choked with emotion as tears fell from the corners of his eyes. Senior Sun, look at you. You've already cried just now. Now that Junior Brother Xiao is safe and sound, why do you have to do this? Qian Diheng's voice sounded again. I. Sun Shu's lips curled into a smile, but he couldn't finish his sentence. Junior Brother Xiao, you are really amazing. At this time, Qian Diheng had already arrived in front of Xiao Hua. He didn't have any intention of stopping. He directly rushed towards Xiao Hua and gave him a bear hug as he shouted, You were able to kill that person from the heavenly demon sect by yourself. Moreover, You were able to escape from the formation. Cough, cough. Xiao Hua's heart felt warm, but he still pushed away Qian Diheng's enthusiasm and said with a smile, "This little brother was just lucky." Luck? Damn it. Why can't I be so lucky? Qian Diheng let go of Xiao Hua and said, "This time, I owe you a big favor." Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Why do you owe this little brother a favor again?" Sigh. Do you still need to say it? Qian Diheng looked at Xiao Hua very affectionately. Originally, the first one to escape should be junior brother Xiao. But junior brother Xiao let me, senior sister Kuin and senior sister Sun all come out. Only you came out last. If this isn't a big favor, then what is? Xiao Hua scratched his head and said with a smile, "Unfortunately, that hole was too small. It could only allow one person to escape. Otherwise, this little brother would have also escaped. Junior brother Qian, junior brother Xiao, this is not a place to talk. We should leave this place as soon as possible." Kuan Fian looked quietly at the side and suddenly said, "If the heavenly demon sect disciples catch up, we will be in trouble." Exactly. Junior brother Xiao, we should hurry and leave. Sun Shu also woke up. She wiped away the tears on her cheeks and said hurriedly. So the three of them picked a direction and headed west. They didn't sleep or rest and flew for 3 days straight. They found a secluded place and entered a cave. Then, they used a formation to seal the cave and cultivated for 2 days. Only then did they start their journey again. When they were escaping, Sun Shu had already asked Xiao Hua who was the cultivator who sealed the formation after she escaped. Xiao Hua originally wanted to tell her the truth. However, when he thought about how the heavenly demon sect's sovereign's cultivation was too high, it was understandable that she escaped from the hands of a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator. However, if she escaped from a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator's formation, there was no way he could justify himself. Moreover, this matter involved Yin Ming. He had already decided not to reveal that Yin Ming was a devil cultivator. Naturally, he couldn't drag Yin Ming, who was already killed in the eyes of Sun Shu and the others, into this matter. He could only say that it was a heavenly demon sect disciple and that he didn't know him. Sun Shu naturally trusted Xiao Hua. Whatever Xiao Hua said was the truth. She didn't ask any more questions. Even if Xiao Hua escaped, she didn't want to ask a single word. She was afraid that if she recalled a little more, it would make her sad. On the other hand, Kuren Fian was very curious. He asked one question after another, as if he wanted to know the truth. After being asked too many questions, Xiao Hua just turned his head and smiled. "Senior sister Sun, do you still remember what that heavenly devil sect disciple said when you had just escaped?" "What did he say?" Sun Shu's face turned slightly red. Lowering her head, she said, "I only cared about escaping. How could I have the mind to think about anything else?" Hee. Although we were unlucky and encountered the internal strife of Spirit Pay Mountain Manor. But the person that the heavenly devil sect disciple was looking for in the end seemed to be senior sister Sun. Xiao Hua chose his words carefully. Otherwise, after senior sister Sun escaped, the heavenly devil sect wouldn't have let this little brother escape so easily. What? The heavenly devil sect was looking for senior sister Sun? Qian Diheng was greatly shocked. Looking at Sun Shu, he asked, "Senior sister, which disciple of the heavenly devil sect did you offend? You were actually being hunted down? And with such a huge formation at that?" How would I know?" Sun Shu thought for a long time and couldn't help but shake her head, saying, "Although I had long known about devil cultivators, the name Heavenly Devil Sect was also something that I had just heard about. How could I have possibly offended them? Not to mention offending any devil cultivators. Along the way, it seems that you only had some conflicts with a group of cultivators in Weeping Moon City." Kuan Fian frowned. "That's right. That day, didn't they say that they were looking for senior brother Chong who didn't appear?" Xiao Hua suddenly thought, could this senior brother Chong be Chong Huan? Xiao Hua glanced at Sun Shu. Sun Shu also seemed to have thought of it, but her eyes were still blank. She said in a low voice, "I and those cultivators. I don't know any of them." "AI, forget it. Who cares who they are?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Left and right, they either died or ran away. Who knows?" "That's right. Who did that condensed knowledge treasure belong to in the end?" Kuan Fian asked again, his eyes staring at Xiaohua. Xiaohua thought for a while and said, "No one got it." That devil cultivator forcefully broke through the restriction of Qingwu. Qingwu self-destructed. That condensed knowledge treasure should have been destroyed too. Ah? Qian Diheng roared, "That's a condensed knowledge treasure. Those devil cultivators, they didn't use it, and instead casually destroyed it. It's really, really hateful. Hee, left and right, it's not ours. If it's destroyed, then it's destroyed." Xiao Hua curled his lips. "It's already not bad that we were able to escape." "That's right, and the four of us escaped without any injuries," Sun Shu said with a gratified smile. "I'm afraid that those Lonely sect disciples are all dead. This is all thanks to junior brother Xiao." Qian Diheng said with a smile, "When we return from our travels, I will definitely tell Master. Cough, cough, many thanks, many thanks. I will definitely give little brother some benefits." Xiaohua also said with a smile, "Don't worry, Xiaohua. When we return to the Imperial Thunder sect, whatever you want, I will give it to you." Qian Diheng naturally knew that it was Xiaohua who helped him escape with his life. He was not stingy at all. "Great." Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "This is what I need." Sun Shu covered her mouth and smiled, her eyes filled with joy. Although Kuan Fian smiled, there was some hesitation in his eyes. After that, the three of them flew for dozens of days. Seeing that they were close to the Luofeng mountain, Xiaohua began to secretly plan. Seeing that they were flying over a hill, Xiaohua stopped. Since Xiaohua safely escaped from the Lingpei mountain villa, the three of them had already faintly followed Xiaohua's lead. Seeing Xiaohua land for no reason, everyone's heart trembled. They naturally thought of Xiaohua's vigilance when he returned from the Feather Immortal Assembly. Their faces changed slightly. Qian Diheng even tried to release his spirit sense and said in a low voice, "What's wrong? Junior brother Xiao, is there any danger ahead?" Hearing this, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But then his heart moved and he nodded slightly. "I feel that something is wrong ahead. It seems that I have some trouble ahead. But whether it has anything to do with me, I can't say for sure." "Then, let's take a detour," Sun Shu said without hesitation. Xiaohua shook his head. "No, if it's really related to me, I'd better go and take a look. I can't implicate three senior brothers because of this matter." "No, let's go together." Sun Shu refused again without hesitation. How could Xiaohua let them go to the Luofeng mountain? After thinking for a while, he said, "My flying speed is extremely fast. If there is any danger, I can escape. If senior sister Sun follows, I'm afraid I can't take care of both of you." Sun Shu's face was full of disappointment. He forced a smile and said reluctantly, "Junior brother Xiao is right. I will only be a burden to you if I go. It's better for junior brother Xiao to arrange it." Xiaohua smiled at Sun Shu happily. Looking at Qian Diheng and Kuan Fian, he said, "Three senior brothers, let's take a detour for 100 miles. I'll send a message 10 days later. How about that?" Qian Diheng glanced at Kuan Fian, and Kuan Fian nodded slightly. Thus, he said with a smile, "All right, junior brother Xiao, I will listen to your arrangements. You must be careful." -8. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.